That feels like a lawyer undercut where it's like,
Yeah.
that
Oh,
is the thing.
oh,
Well,
Connor, I
actually,
know.
it reminds me very much of the flag here in Florida. That is a red saltire with a state emblem on it. So
Nice.
I'm in Florida too, and I actually I didn't like the state flag originally. And then I checked out the history, and it actually does incorporate all of the history of all the demographics of Florida.
yeah,
So
yeah, it does. Yeah, it's the design to me is just not very aesthetically pleasing. You
it's
know, I mean,
it's not, but the St. Andrew's cross is the same cross from the House of Castile, which were the original Spaniards who settled the state. Then there's a Native American woman in the foreground, representing like that. This was predominantly like a Native American settlement. And then the steamboat in the background is supposed to be representative of the early colonists. So it actually is Anglo-European colonists, Native Americans, and Spanish, which is, while not aesthetically pleasing, it's representative of the state as a whole as far as from like a historical perspective. So it's
yeah,
actually
for sure. Yeah, I can appreciate that. I don't know. I guess I don't know. I'm a little too aesthetically focused, I guess, on that one. There's an old flag in Florida that is not, is never officially used except for one day. It's called the "Let Us Alone" flag. If anybody wants to Google that flag, it looks like a plate of vomit, and it just says "Leave us alone." And unfortunately, I found out later on that "Let us alone" was a reference to "Don't mess with our slavery."
Damn.
But other than that, I
right.
think this flag, in pure aesthetic terms, I think this flag really screams Florida. And I'll have to drop a link to that in the chat here. I have to share that with you guys because it just is so. Here it is. I'm just gonna share it real quick. It's really just.
Are you both just before? Are you both streaming right now? Have you both started streaming?
I have.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right after you show that, we will do what we came here to do. So.
All right. Yeah. No.
Right.
Yeah. I just dropped it in the chat. But,
I'm live. I'm not looking at my chat, but I'm live as well.
That's a good idea. Okay, so let's get started. So, hello, my name is Layman, and I'm very excited because today I have with me two people who I respect quite a lot on this platform, debating open borders. We have, on one hand, Counterpoints, the enlightened, 800 IQ, conservative, centrist of the debate today. On the other hand, we have Bastiat, the chief neoliberal shill, the best neoliberal girl boss since Margaret Thatcher herself. So Bastiat, we have both of these gentlemen here today to debate open borders, and just so everybody watching is aware, the way that... So I gave them a definition of open borders, and I'm just going to give the audience the definition that I basically gave both of you, just so everybody knows what the hell we're even talking about. Basically, what open borders are, they are borders that are essentially defined by basically free movement of people between borders, incredibly lacking substantive border control over who is allowed to cross those borders, if any at all. So that's what they're going to be debating about. They're going to be debating about whether or not that is a good thing for our globalized world to head in, if that's a good direction to head in. Basically, I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, who they are, very briefly, what their political leanings are, and they will then give their arguments and their thoughts on the topic, and then after that we'll have an open discussion, and I will moderate it if necessary. So, I'm going to let you go first, Bastiat, then I'll let Connor go after you. So Bastiat, take us away.
Okay, well, so my name is Bastiat, and I think Layman did a very good introduction. I'm generally on the liberal side of things, and I'm streaming here on Twitch, so it's great to be here. Thanks, Layman, and thanks, Connor, for the opportunity to talk with you. So, As far as open borders go, perhaps the term, perhaps we need a new term for this, free movement of people or something. But generally speaking, I would agree with your definition, except I would say that, as it's generally understood, there's still a border that you cross through and a checkpoint. It's just that the government can't stop you unless it has a really good reason. So no longer would it be able to stop you purely based on your nationality. It could stop you if you were, carrying a disease, or if you were carrying some kind of, destructive device, or if you were a member of a terrorist organization. But 99 out of, 100, or, really many more people than that will be able to get through just fine, to work, to live, and to do all the other things that everybody else does in an ordinary life. And it is my belief, and I think it is generally supported by the evidence, that more immigration has been for the United States, and I'm primarily interested in the United States, less interested in the benefits to the world writ large, although I think they're probably also quite clear. Whenever the United States has had high rates of immigration, high rates of people being able to come to the country to live and to work and to thrive and to prosper, the country has grown explosively and been a beacon of freedom and prosperity for the entire world. By contrast, when the United States has turned its back on this history, as it did, for example, in the 1920s, as it did in the 1880s with the Chinese Exclusion Act. When it has done so, it has hurt itself economically. It has gone against its own founding principles as a melting pot of peoples, an asylum of mankind for all the world, and it has done so to the detriment of its own people, to the slowdown of its economy, and ultimately, I view most immigration restrictions as self-imposed wounds that we would be quite fortunate to avoid. And so, generally speaking, I think we need to have, or would at least benefit from, far greater rates of immigration, not just because they would benefit our country, not just because they are in line with our country's founding principles, our history, and our culture, but at the end of the day, because it is purely and simply not the government's business to hire armed thugs to stop peaceful people from crossing borders that should be defined as existing to stop the reach of government and not existing to stop the reach of peaceful people. So generally speaking, I'm pro-immigration, and it's great to be here.
Wonderful. Connor, you may give your intro.
Okay, my name is Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. I identify as centrist or center-right. I definitely have a way more strict perception on government authority and security and how we organize as sovereign nations. I think that, sorry for moving my mic and making weird noises, but basically what I would say is that governments are administered based on regional influence. They have the ability, like the reason why we have counties, the reason why we have cities, the reason why we have states, the reason why we have the federal government is because they're all able to wield some level of influence within a territory. That regional power is based off of the ability to understand the people that are around it and for those people to, pay taxes, receive social services, and on top of that, basically for that area to be secure. You can't have social mobility or economic mobility or anything like that if you don't have some level of security. And that's really my main concern is when we look at the amount of damage that just a few dozen people can do, whether we're talking about like terrorist attacks, mass shootings, even cyber attacks, intellectual property theft, all of the things that are kind of facing us in the modern era as far as nefarious actors, you have to have some level of control. And we're really going to get into that because the thing about it is, yeah, sure, great. Free, peaceable people who want to travel the world and be nice and contribute to the economy. Awesome, right? Like, we all love those people, right? Here's the problem, though. You don't know who that is until you talk to them. The government is not clairvoyant. They're not psychic. They don't know who's who until they check a social security number or an ID, name, date of birth, social media history, who they're affiliated with, and all that kind of stuff. Also, I don't think that liberalism is genetic. I don't think people are born and they're just like, oh, mixed economy, capitalism, and individual rights. That sounds based. Let's just do that for everywhere all the time. And I think if you look at history, and if you also look at, all of the sovereign nations of the earth, liberalism and liberal democracy and republicanism and mixed economy capitalism is more, it might be a global hegemon, but it's still wildly unpopular in certain parts of the globe and parts of the globe that want to destroy it. I don't want to open myself up to that kind of vulnerability. And also on top of that, Bastiat very specifically was saying that like he's only interested in United States politics. That's cool. That's great. But at the same time, when you look at our competitors, if they maintain an advantage and then we give them a vulnerability, they will exploit that vulnerability. I'll be happy to get into that in the open, but I feel like I've already been ranting for 5 minutes straight, so I'll just shut up for now.
Well, I would say that we are now entering the open. So, which one of you would like to go first? I'll.
Well, yeah.
Who has the most to say? Okay,
if you want to keep going, or
Connor, if you just want to, jump on in.
I don't want to rant. I want to ask probing questions because basically, I feel like in order for us to disagree, we got to kind of firmly root what we're talking about. So you were saying that at the border, it's not the government's job in order to harass peaceable, economically productive folks or whatever. How do you have any kind of border control that enforces some kind of security without basically verifying who's coming in, who's coming not, stopping cars, talking to people, searching cars, all that kind of stuff? How do you enforce a border that has a security apparatus while not harassing peaceable, freedom-loving, economically savvy people?
Well, any kind of government searching and probing and investigating and opening people's trunks to look through their cars and all that is a kind of harassment, of course, until somebody has been proven guilty of some kind of crime. But even if you imagine a very strict regimen in which these people are waiting for 2 weeks at the border, while some federal agent goes through every single one of their social media posts. I mean, you're comparing that right now with processes that just bleed on into years, sometimes a decade. Right, so even if you're talking about some very strict procedure like that, where you are really just taking a fine-tooth comb to everybody, and you're forcing them to get the COVID vaccine and wait for 3 weeks, or wait for 2 months, to get both doses for them to kick in, whatever you're doing, right? Even if you have a very high standard there. The point is to say, once you've done your background check, I think we might disagree on the specifics of what kind of background check you do, but even if you imagine, I think, a very rigorous background check, once you've done that, and you found nothing, that's it, right? You don't get to say, you stay out for economic reasons, or you stay out because we're worried about a culture, or you stay out because we're worried that, there aren't enough resources to go around, whatever form this criminal background check or whatever might take, that's it, right? There's no, and of course it might often not take that long. For example, somebody coming from Canada or Britain or the European Union or our East Asian allies, these countries have very advanced systems for tracking criminal activity and things like that too. There's no reason we couldn't come to some kind of bilateral or a multilateral agreement with them to say, we'll take your word on these kinds of documents, you take our word on these kinds of documents if we thought their standards were good enough. So there's certainly no reason this kind of stuff would have to take so long. But even if it did, it would be a lot faster, a lot fairer, and a lot more economically useful than the kind of just years-long slog that we have today.
Okay, so that's interesting because I think we can parse these things out. So if we were talking about like allies or countries that were like similar culturally, mixed economy, capitalist republics or whatever, I don't know if you care about capitalism. I care about capitalism a little bit. Mixed economy capitalist republics who have a decent safety record when it comes to, sorry for the dog noises, when it comes to, I don't know, like liberal republicanism or human rights or anything like that. If you wanted to put that on the fast track, that's totally fine. My question is more like when we're dealing with, failed states. So Central American countries that have high rates of violence, high rates of drug activity, high rates of, things that we don't like. And I'm not saying like zero immigration. I'm just saying, how does that fit into your worldview? Yeah. And then also similarly, you brought up an interesting point about culture that I don't want to miss. You were saying that culture is irrelevant, but at the same time, I don't divorce economics from culture. So, for instance, if somebody was a tanky or a simp for the CCP, and they literally wanted to have 300 million Chinese folk immigrate overnight to us and then vote in, authoritarian communism democratically, that's technically possible under your system. So where are the checks against these kinds of things that, while might be extreme hypothetically, aren't necessarily addressed by your first principles?
So first of all, that is very extreme hypothetical. All the research suggests there's no more than 100 to 150 million people who, if they could come to the United States tomorrow, would come to the United States tomorrow. And second of all, if we're going to talk about culture or what people want, I don't believe there are 300 million people in China that would that would come to the United States and then vote for the Chinese Communist Party system that they are presumably leaving to escape. So unless we're imagining some kind of, Manchurian candidate sort of situation on steroids, I think that situation is just not really one that's really worth considering. I mean, that's just not how people operate. I mean, even if you don't believe in some kind of universal liberal worldview like I do, I mean, ultimately, I believe the forces that are agitating against liberalism, democracy, Republican values, and, small r Republican values, and capitalism are fundamentally state-based, not individual people acting against them. But even if, you raised a few points here, so let me respond to all of them. Even if we set that aside for a minute, did you just say that you're fine with open borders from our allied countries like Britain, France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand? All those countries were cool with it? Well, because that would be a great start. I mean, if we agree on that, that's almost 1 billion people able to travel, freely back and forth everywhere. I mean, if you're cool with that I think would be a pretty useful point, because that would deal with a lot of that would be, these are cultures that are very different in some ways, even if we share a lot of values in common. So, I mean, was that what you were saying there?
Well, so yeah, let's break that down a little bit. There's a favorite saying of mine. It's from a very progressive movie called Full Metal Jacket about the Vietnam War, where one of the generals says, inside every young Vietnamese person, definitely doesn't use the racial slur right there, there is an American. And what I think about our allies, even though I think they can be quite cocked on things like guns, freedom of speech, all that kind of stuff, that there is a certain amount of cultural compatibility when you talk about like liberal democratic republicanism. So when you talk about South Korea, when you talk about France, when you talk about Germany, when you talk about the UK, when you talk about even some Central European countries, there's already kind of like a cross-pollination of like civic virtue that I think is pretty easy to articulate. I don't think it would take more than a generation to educate people on like the American political system. And if they wanted to come here and be like, oh yeah, I want to participate in that system, that seems like the regional, the regional place that I want to participate in. Yeah, awesome, great. People from allied countries who share similar civic social institutions who want to shoot guns and eat McDonald's, fucking based, right? But my concern, so for instance, like this is the main problem that I have with like freedom of movement arguments, is that there are certain cultural tropes and cultural traditions that I absolutely reserve the right to enforce. As an example, like Central and South America, even Spain to a certain extent, animal fighting is viewed as like a cultural norm. Whether you're talking about like bullfighting, chicken fighting, dog fighting, anything like that, it's viewed as a cultural norm. It's socially accepted, morally acceptable. I wouldn't want to bend any of these rules for people who were coming in and just say, oh, well, we're just going to accept animal cruelty because these people come from a different culture. Absolutely not. And on top of that, there would be certain standards that if we were talking about this like 1 billion people who would be able to cross borders, there's certain standards that I would want them to update to. So for instance, like if we're talking about like Malaysia, who's ostensibly an ally, Thailand, who's ostensibly an ally, all those kinds of places. Some of these places operate what's effectively like sweat and slave shops. They have labor practices that outcompete the American model. They have labor practices that are morally questionable. They have safety standards that are morally questionable. I would say that any country that wants to be part of this, like, I don't know, free world circle jerk of liberal, democratic, mixed economy capitalism, would have to update to the moral and ethical and civic standards, and that is a part of culture. You said that like culture doesn't matter. I think that those civic and social standards are a part of the culture. And if you want to be a part of that system, then you have to abide by those standards. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, but we already have laws against everything you just described. I mean, whether they're just or not. Yeah, here. And they're going to come here, presumably. I mean, none of that changes. I mean, the laws would still be enforced, presumably. I suppose there's the possibility that these people would, you imagine they might vote differently. They might vote to keep the things they're presumably trying to leave behind. They might vote for some small part of them. I mean, but ultimately, even if you're right, there's some possibility that they'll vote to legalize chicken fights or whatever. I mean, I think even if that were true, I think you'd have to weigh that against every other possibility. But the research suggests that that's just not true. Like, what are some things that immigrants who come to the United States and then voting for to recreate the societies in which they've left. All the kinds of pernicious practices that you might describe that come from different parts of the world, like, say, I don't know, honor killings, for example. I mean, there's never been any proposal to do that. Sharia law, never been any proposal to implement that. In fact, people have preemptively banned it in several states. That was kind of a cause célèbre. The critical race theory before critical race theory. Yeah, like states like Oklahoma and the Midwest that have banned Sharia law.
Why?
Even though there was never any serious consideration of it, there was, because it's a popular political cause. The same way this critical race theory stuff.
Okay, Bastiat, but I'm, I respect you. I respect your intellect, all that kind of stuff. I don't feel like when you're bringing these things up, you're being disingenuous. But I think that there's a lot of nuance to the things that you just said. Oftentimes, when you're talking about like Sharia law or let's just go ahead and bite the bullet that a lot of uncomfortability when it comes to immigration is from the Middle East and North Africa, right? Let's just bite the bullet on that. Because
I wouldn't honestly bite that bullet. I think it's the entire world. I think there's a lot of bias among Americans against foreigners generally. I think most people would actually be opposed to immigration, even from many of the liberal democratic countries you mentioned, because they're worried about economic spillover effects. So I don't concede.
True,
it's like
I do. Okay,
listen.
True. I am bigoted against Europeans. We can acknowledge this. Okay, but the point is, let's nail this down. Because very specifically, like if we were trying to come to some kind of like agreeable understanding, at least of each other's perspectives, and from an incrementalist worldview, you were like, hey, nations can have sovereign rules like laws against animal cruelty and all that kind of stuff. But if you meet a certain threshold of like economic productivity, legal standards when it comes to like workers' rights and pay, and civic virtue when it comes to like mixed economy capitalism and liberal democracy and all that kind of stuff, you can join some kind of like expedited cross-border travel union where you can join the club, right?
Like the European Union.
Sure. Okay. So let's just go with that as like an incrementalist implementation of your plan, and then let's move to more of the extreme stuff that I think that most people are concerned with when it comes to this kind of rhetoric. Okay.
Well, I mean, to be clear, what you just described is basically the European Union, where they can come there, they can, live and vote, all the rest of it. And I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Or basically, or like the United States, even really, where you just move somewhere and you instantly can vote. You can go from California to Texas or Texas to California. You can bring your weird cultural standards from each of your respective states and instantly vote as if you've already lived there all your life. So that's basically what I'm talking about.
Okay, well, I think the reason why I'm comfortable enough signing off on these kinds of things is because I think there is a certain amount of like cultural cross-pollination that like leads to a certain amount of like obvious integration, right? I actually lived in Belgium as a child. I lived there for 4 years when I was 8 to 12. I speak French as a second language. I went to school in France. I got my ass kicked in France, or excuse me, not France, French. And so as a result, like I actually, while difficult and while people were dicks to me, there was a certain amount of integrated process that was logical, made sense. Like there were social and civic institutions that made sense, like linguistic. The language was the largest challenge. After that, figuring out a few cultural nuances, it wasn't that big of a deal to integrate into that society. Where I want to push back though is because I feel like you just glossed over a bunch of information when it came to the Midwest and like Michigan and other places that have preemptively banned Sharia law, where there are states who have accepted large amounts of immigrants from places like Somalia. And on top of that, if you look at Pew Research polling and if you look at the support for either Sharia or suicide bombing or cultural tropes that I think are completely counter to the United States of America, the support is like shockingly high. Like I think in Pakistan, support for suicide bombing civilians in the defense of Islam is at like 3%. And in the Palestinian territories like Gaza and the West Strip, it's as high as 70%. I don't give a fuck who you are. If you think suicide bombing civilians in the name of any reason is an acceptable moral thing, I don't want you in my fucking country. So that's kind of the thing where it's like these things aren't arbitrary. They're not fluid. Like this isn't. I mean, you're giving me weird eyebrows, so go ahead.
Well, a little bit. I mean, even that, the 70% figure. I mean, so does that mean the other 30% are just like, sorry, you're screwed? And that's basically what you're saying there, right? I mean, if you're in that 30% that, maybe has adopted some of these values, suicide bombing is wrong and it's cringe and peaceful resolution of disputes and a democratic system is based.
That's the thumbnail. That's a thumbnail right there. Suicide bombing is cringe.
If that's your opinion, and you're in the Palestinian territories, you're just you're out of luck. Sorry, buddy. Your neighbors feel this way, so you may be an individual who has done all these. Wait. This seems to be what you're saying, right? If you're saying that we should make this decision based on, like Pew Research polls conducted in, say, the Palestinian territories, or at least that should be one factor of consideration, it seems like we're really losing the individual here. It's almost like, why even bother checking, what somebody's background is at that point, if we're already saying, look, some of these cultures, they're just not compatible. It doesn't really matter about the individuals at stake, the individual here, because 70% of them responded in a poll, and they feel they feel otherwise.
Yeah, but to be clear, to articulate my standard, because you kind of assume my standard. So, okay. Like I said, in my very progressive, very woke movie, Full Metal Jacket, inside every young Vietnamese person, there's an American. There's a presumption that like our values are ultimately correct, whether you're talking about like human rights or liberal values or small r republicanism, mixed economy capitalism, like some level of free market, all that kind of stuff. There is this presumption that these morals are correct, and I think that's defensible. I also think part of the reason why they're defensible is that because they're potentially universal. It is a moral system that can encompass people from different religions, that it can encompass people from different languages, all that kind of stuff. I think but I think it brings up like the paradox of tolerance, right? You can tolerate everything except for intolerance. So for me, if let's say like the entire West Bank like tomorrow was like, hey, we want to move. The entire West Bank wants to move to the United States tomorrow. They want to immigrate to Miami, some shit, right? And what I would say is, okay, but we're gonna vet the dog shit out of your history. We're gonna coordinate with criminal investigative organizations in your country. We're going to vet your social media history. We're going to ask you a shitload of ideological questions about what you believe about economics, culture, civic institutions, liberal democracy, all that kind of stuff. And if you meet a certain threshold of incompatibility, then I'm sorry, you're just going to have to stay where you are. And I have no problem saying that. I don't think people are entitled to like some kind of like random free-for-all vagabond lifestyle across the entire planet. I think sovereign nations, especially when it comes to security, have the absolute right to decide who is going to come into their country. And on top of that, if a different sovereign nation, almost wrapped up, I promise, if a different sovereign nation, based off of like Westphalian sovereignty, where people are able to control their borders and control their own outlook, if there was a country like Poland, for instance, who has faced a lot of historical oppression, and they decided that like we want to keep a certain cultural, ethnic, linguistic makeup of our country, we're not going to kill anyone, we're not going to purge anyone, we're not going to hurt anyone, but basically we're going to control these borders, I don't give a fuck. That is their right to do as a nation to decide collectively.
Yeah. I will say, just to kind of get this out of the way, and just to kind of make my position on the question of nations very clear, and I will address everything else, and I imagine I will still talk, in the framework of nations here, because that is the framework of the world we live in. But I will say quite plainly that I do not give a fuck about the existence of sovereign nations, and primarily, especially outside of the bounds of the United States of America, I do not care in the least. Sovereign nations, that is, say, the United States, are constructs used to better realize the ideals that I believe in. So I grant them no value inherently. I do not concede that they have any rights. And if I had a better way to guarantee the survival and the perpetuation of the ideals that I believe in, I would destroy them all tomorrow. I have no value placed on the nation or on the legitimacy of the nation or the rights of nations as opposed to the rights of individuals. So Westphalian sovereignty is a fine international standard to the extent that it helps realize the individual rights that I hold to. But beyond that, to the extent it counterbounds, or rather counteracts or countermands those individual rights, I am happy to dispose of it or to violate it as I see fit. I view the United States as the core of a liberal project, a liberal international order that is fundamentally universal by nature and will someday lead to the ultimate liberation of all the peoples of the world into some state of the highest possible imaginable freedom. So just to be clear, while I recognize that nations exist and we have to deal with that world, I do not grant them any legitimacy, and I certainly do not grant them any rights. And those concepts are useful only insofar to me as they advance the individual freedom that I believe in. Indeed, that's why I believe in the United States as thoroughly as I do, because I believe it's a useful institution, a great engine for realizing those rights, and it should be celebrated and appreciated for that reason, but not because it has some notion of sovereignty that grows out of the 30 Years of War. I don't care about any of that. So I do want to make clear that that's my feelings on the question of sovereign nations. They are tools, and to the extent they work against what I want, I am happy to annihilate their sovereignty. So okay. I do want to say that before I respond to the points you made.
Sure.
Just to kind of lay my point out on sovereign nations. You mentioned the paradox of intolerance, or paradox of tolerance. I think that's Karl Popper's idea. Mm-hmm. We have to be intolerant to people who will be intolerant of us. And ultimately, what we have done in the United States to resolve that is to enforce laws equally. We have not had to take the approach of the Europeans or the people in, I think, other countries around the world, where we have had to ban certain speech or ban certain types of people, or we have had to banish certain types of political opinions. We haven't had to do any of that because we have been very successful at the equal enforcement and equal protection of the laws. And that's all you need to do to ultimately have a democratic and free society in the most diverse country in the world here, politically, ethnically, religiously, here in the United States. That's all you need to do, is equal protection and enforcement of the laws. You do not need to treat different groups differently. You don't need to screen out certain countries or other countries. Indeed, for most of our history, we didn't do that. For most of our history, we were quite liberal as to who could come here. And it is a relatively, comparatively recent development that we have stopped doing that. And it's a surprising thing, indeed, given that, we are not just some mere nation, which is another reason that I'm so, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful of you. I'm purely talking about the idea, why I am so disdainful of the idea of nations and national sovereignty. The United States is no mere nation. It is something approaching a global empire that has a culture that has basically been adopted in some part, by almost all the people of the world. Its reach in terms of its music, its movies, its culture is mammoth and gargantuan and perhaps impossible to define, certainly far and away exceeding any culture that has ever existed before it, and perhaps will ever exist after it. So the idea that Americans have this, unique culture that other people in other parts of the world have not had exposure to, no, every single day, people all over the world are being brought in, pre-acculturated, primed in very real and enduring ways to become better immigrants. Better potential immigrants, at least, through their exposure to American culture, their exposure to the internet, which is still thoroughly dominated by American platforms and American norms and standards. So America is a very unique nation, to the extent it even counts as a nation in that respect, a very unique country, I think we could at least agree on, because, people can come here and already have a very deep and abiding understanding of what it is to be an American, to our culture, our high ideals, even if they don't have a great understanding of how their local city government works. And it's worth noting that that's something that ultimately not only can be learned, but which many Americans themselves do not have, and which we certainly wouldn't demand of Americans before saying, well, for example, before you reproduce, before you spawn another human being, we must make sure that you're not going to spawn the next mass shooter, because of course we do know that the vast majority of crimes in this country are committed by native-born Americans, even on a per capita basis. And we have to make sure that you're not going to commit crime, that you're going to be a productive person. You're not going to be the next terrorist, the next Ethan Rogers incel going on a rampage against all those girls who didn't talk to you in high school. Of course, we would never set that standard for people born in this country. And the only reason we set that standard for people in the rest of the world who come here after birth, as opposed to being born into it, is because we have this idea that you adopt these ideas, they're just in the air here. They're just in the air. Your parents just give them to you, just pass them on to you. Even though our government does very little, of any sense of real propagation of those ideas. And to the extent that's true, that is something that is an increasingly global phenomenon as American culture reaches into new areas and becomes increasingly globalized.
Listen, buddy, I can only get so fucking erect off of your fucking freedom, your fucking freedom boner. All right, I can only get so vicariously erect.
Yeah, I just want to say I want to give Connor a lot of time here, just because even Bastiat, it was very passionate and I loved it, but we got to give Connor a lot of time here.
Please,
so,
please,
No,
as much as you want.
Go off.
You don't have to. I can punch through it.
Okay.
And there's primarily one thing that I want to focus on, but I do want to address some of the things that you said. So don't place any value on like the concepts of the nations. So the way that I view nation states are as the regional culmination of kind of like a cultural, sociological, linguistic zeitgeist. Any country in the world, especially if you look back in the history of like political corporatism, basically political entities that serve an underlying body. This is how states have operated in the past, and on top of that, they do serve essential functions. Whether you're talking about guaranteeing food, guaranteeing security, guaranteeing a certain level of social stability, guaranteeing a certain level of social coherence. That way, people can. There's a psychological idea called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I misapply it all the time. I recommend everybody Google it, but basically, it's how human beings self-actualize. I think states have a role and a responsibility to allow people to self-actualize to the maximum extent possible. So where you see that the United States is just like a pragmatic vehicle through which to espouse and implement your values across the globe or whatever, I don't think that this is something that can be done away with once it's, let's say that the United States of America achieves like cultural, global, and civic hegemony across the entire planet. I still think that you would need regionalized states in order to perpetuate the value system that allowed that system to function in the first place. I don't think this is, like you said, in the air or in the water. I think it's something that actually has to be culturally, socially, civically reinforced, and that's part of the culture. Which is weird. I know I'm like latching on to one thing that you said, but that's why I think the culture needs to be respected. So I do want to get back to nation states, but the thing about some of the later things that you said, one of the things that you mentioned was equal protection of the law. Well, where we see the struggle in modern American societies is where our desire to respect like the religions and traditions of people who are different than us come into conflict with our law. So for instance, like female genital mutilation is a cultural practice in some parts of the world. It's viewed as common as circumcision is inside the United States, despite the fact that it scars the clitoris, basically eliminates pleasure for women and all that kind of stuff. And it's a fucking problem, but because it's a social norm in some parts of the society, we've had to criminally penalize people here. When you talk about France, with them treating people differently under the law, the reason why that they've had to do burqa bans and all that kind of stuff is because there's ghettos, cultural ghettos that basically exist where they're not integrated into the rest of society. And when you're talking about, so you're also not just talking about governmental institutions, but you're also talking about social institutions like banks or public places where people are garbed up because it's part of their religion, and that limits their access to services. So what takes priority? Their individual right to practice religion, or the public interest of holding everybody to the same standard, whether like legalistically or social expectations? I'm not done yet, so just give me a second if you want to take some notes. So you asked like whether or not we hold Americans to some kind of like civic or social standard, and is it fair of us to expect foreigners to live up to some like idealized version of what it is to be American? My answer is yes. And we're fucking up by not doing that for our own people. If you gotta go, you gotta go.
Some shouting. I'll be right back.
Go ahead, buddy.
Okay.
It's all right. I can pause there.
Yeah, no worries. Just be prepared to hit play when he gets back.
Oh, I'm rolling. Chat can suck it.
There he is.
Sorry, I apologize. I've been taking notes, so you have to stop. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but hearing some shouting, but the cats were apparently a problem. It sounded like somebody's breaking in the house.
Well, as long as nobody has broken into the house.
No. Who's breaking the house? I apologize for breaking in.
And if you were in the Eurocuct area of your free trade, free travel agreement, it would just be your expectation to die on camera right now. So thank God you live in the United States, right? So anyways, so just final points. So I think we're massively screwing up by not expecting civic education or civic understanding out of our body politic. I think that when you say that immigrants are coming to the United States of America with some kind of like well-formed definition of what it is to be American, that's intensely interesting to me, because I think if you ask an American what it means to be American, they'd be like, McDonald's, Marvel movies, porn, strip clubs, alcohol. Like it literally wouldn't be about some kind of like cohesive civic identity where people care about like principles and values. It would be about what products you can consume. And while I do love consuming products and then getting excited about new products and then consuming those products and then getting excited about new products, I do think that there should be something more as far as like a principled or virtue core of what it is to be American, or what it is to be Western, or what it is to be free.
Yeah. I'm curious, what does it mean to be American to you?
McDonald's, porn,
seriously, what does it mean?
liquor.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so okay, for me, anyways, it does mean that there's like a certain amount of like principle. There is a principled core that I think does exist in the Constitution that I do care about. And I've really thought long and hard, very hard and very long, what part of this applies to all Americans, right? And like what part of it, if they believe this, they are reinforcing the social and political and cultural core of the United States. And what I boiled it down to was freedom of expression and freedom of speech, like basically the right to conscience. I think that's a bedrock principle as enshrined in the First Amendment. I also think it's incredibly important for any free society to give its citizens the ability to exercise their freedom to conscience. The other one is the right to self-defense, including up to the government, basically writing it into our foundational principles that if we are being abused by the people who are in charge of us, we have the ability and right to resist that action. I think that's unique to Americanism, because most states would say, no, just shut up and take it. We're the sovereign. You have to take it, in the metaphorical pooper. And then limited government. And limited government, I don't mean in a libertarian sense. I mean limited government in the fact that the government is expected to follow the laws that it itself puts in. So when we have a constitution, when we have a judiciary that checks the power of the legislature, when we have the legislature checking the executive branch, we come up with standards, and then we can sway from those standards during times of crisis. But then it's ultimately the responsibility of legislators and judiciaries and government officials and officials in general to beat back the structure into what was agreed upon through a legislative consensus. And I would say that while not completely unique, that is what it's fairly uniquely American.
I would say that I guess I would agree with some of that, except I probably wouldn't attach it even to the Constitution. I would say the Constitution is probably an expression of a lot of that. But I guess to me, what is enduringly American is the desire to shape your own life, to form your own life, to live the kind of life that you see fit insofar as you possibly can. And in that comes a lot of what you've mentioned, the ability not just to defend yourself, of course, which I think most people would appreciate, even if they, whatever their opinions might be on gun control, I think most people would appreciate that, at least in the abstract. Freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, freedom to participate in your government, to have a say over the government that controls you, or not controls you, but has some kind of sway over you, that makes laws and all that. The freedom to shape your own life. And it is hard for me to think of an act more fundamentally self-focused, not selfless, but self-driven. An act that more thoroughly represents a person's determination to shape the course of their own life, to shape their future, to try and build a better life than immigration. I mean, people who have taken on this kind of act, which is incredibly difficult. I mean, just think about it, for anybody listening, how difficult it is to pick up and move from one city to the next, let alone from one country to the next. I think that these people are taking an act that is, to me, fundamentally American in character, and which requires, I think, a lot of the characteristics that you just described. I mean, in order to do a desire to shape your own life, to better your own life. In fact, the desire and the realization, I suppose, that for you as an individual, those desires are more important than all the collective benefits of staying where you're at, of having a common culture with other people around you, of having a common bond with people who are ethnically and religiously like you. You have made the determination before you even get here, before you're even immersed in our great free land, that your individual benefit is more important for you than all of these, ethnic, cultural, religious tie downs. And to me, I think that that combined with the reach of American culture means that people here who come to the United States have already adopted or have already made a very big decision that seems to me to be fundamentally American in nature.
How do you feel? Okay.
So this is actually interesting because I hold on. Let me just make a note so I don't forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can talk about the other stuff. I mean, I have that too, but I figured that would be
since you mentioned more than enough to
keeping it immigration and borders focused.
So
deal. So
no, this is a big deal because it kind of gets to the crux of the argument of people who are like, I'm not for. What do they say? I'm not against immigration. I'm against illegal immigration. Like, you probably heard that shit like a million times. And so have I. So the reason why, and this is kind of where I think maybe we're not talking past each other because this is the first time we're talking, but this is where conceptually I think we just completely defer. When you have open borders, limited immigration, all that kind of stuff, where people can do what they want to do. With minimal interference from the government. You talked about a lot of sacrifice that people take on as a part of the American experience, and like, what better way could you express your desire to be American than to sacrifice your collective identity and linguistic and ethnic roots on the altar of freedom and self-improvement in order to come to the United States and be a better human being? All right, awesome, fucking base. That's like the coolest shit ever. But when you have the immigration practice that you're talking about, the ability to maintain those ethno-cultural, linguistic, collectivist abilities, what limit is there to that ability to hold on to that group? Why not say, hey, everybody from this country, we can have a much better economic input if we all move to the United States all at the same time. We'll all support each other. We'll be, an economic collective. We'll maintain all of our cultural traditions, and we'll just be a country within a country. And we'll not sacrifice the collective benefits of language, culture, ethnicity, religion, and all that kind of stuff. We won't integrate. We'll just take advantage of the economic stuff. And then here's another thing that I wanted to bring up just before I lose it. Mm-hmm. I appreciate your individualistic projection onto like the prime thing that makes being an American is the ability to self-actualize along a route that you see fit. But for me, like, it's actually the role of the society and the role of the government to enable that communitarian growth. And with a lot of the negative externalities that I would see with like mass immigration or this kind of like free flow, I seriously think that there's a whole bunch of really deep and dark external consequences that would absolutely get in the way of people's ability to self-actualize along routes that they along this route. Drugs being one of them for sure. That's a massive risk. Terrorism being a massive risk. War being a massive risk. And then also, just to bring it back, that collective ethno-linguistic zeitgeist that you would be able to continue if there was no limit to who was coming in when.
I guess I would say, first of all, again, I'm not big on I have no particular desire to protect any cultures. If a culture disappears because people decide they don't want to be a part of it anymore, wait a minute. Let me just make the point. If a culture disappears because individuals have decided they don't want to participate in it, that's a very different thing than a culture being destroyed by a state or being destroyed by some forceful action. If what you are saying here is that, what about the culture that used to exist in this country before all these people moved away? I mean, look, that's the result of individual choices. Cultures are formed and destroyed all the time. And they survive based on, to some degree, luck, as say other cultures, using the power of violence to destroy them, I suppose. But what we're talking about here is not that. We're talking about free individuals choosing to move, to pick up, to live new lives, and all of that. In a situation where a bunch of people come to the United States, for example, and decide, well, we want to continue on with our culture. We don't want to change our culture. Okay, I mean that's something that we've had in the United States before, in some degree. For example, we had a lot of Chinatowns in the late 19th century, early 20th century. As one example of a sort of ethnic enclave that. Some of the people living there just never really learned English. They never really left, or went too far outside of the small ethnic enclave there. They were still enjoying a better life than they had as a result of the fact that they immigrated and stayed. But ultimately, that's really a minority of the American immigrant story. Most people come here and within a few generations have so thoroughly integrated that they no longer really have any command of the language of the place that they left from. They generally have abandoned that, but that itself is really, and that's pretty universal across groups that have immigrated to the United States, but ultimately that's a matter of free choice, and I think to a degree it's a matter of confidence in American culture that to me sort of underlines a lot of the arguments against immigration. I think a lot of people who are worried about immigration just don't really have any confidence in American culture. They don't view it in the sort of world-beating fashion that I view it. I mean, when I look at the predominance of American media all over the world, the American cultural norms and standards, I mean, how can you look at that and be afraid that that's going to disappear because we have a few more people from some other culture or another culture, even a great many of those people. I mean, it never has yet. There's no reason to imagine in a nation of 330 million people that it would.
All right, so I want to give Connor a chance to say what he wanted to say, and then after Connor, you give your response, uninterrupted. I have a question that I kind of want to raise to both of you. So Go on, Connor.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah, so listen, I appreciate your white pill. Like, I don't know what prescription dose of Zoloft or fucking whatever you're on, but I think I need to up my dosage to whatever yours is. So basically you're right. You're right. I don't have this optimism. I don't have this cultural optimism that liberalism will somehow dominate or mixed economy capitalism will somehow dominate. Maybe I'm too far away from the halls of power. Maybe in the legal field or DC or other places, there's just this unfettered, confidence in the power of the American project to overcome all of its obstacles. And you know what, God bless the people that think that way. I hope they're totally correct. My fears, though, my sincere fears, is that this is really, God. I'm trying not to be rude, but
say whatever you gotta say, man. I won't take. I saw your video you did where you talked about me and being an adorable, nice hair. So I'll just remember that if you say something real nasty.
Okay, there's an important question that backs up there. Are you a natural gas attorney or a petroleum attorney? That's interesting distinction.
Does it really matter? I mean, all
it does matter.
For one it's natural gas.
Okay,
but some of the companies, I mean,
natural gas burns way cleaner than everything else, right?
Well, certainly, it doesn't burn cleaner than a solar panel, I guess, but it's still, I think it's a net good, but, many people would disagree. And the kind of people who want to cut my head off being an oil attorney are not going to be like, oh, well, I didn't know it was a natural gas. Oh, that makes me feel better.
Okay, but
I just want to say, Bastiat, Connor, he doesn't really get along with lawyers very well. So Connor, I just want to give a little frame of warning to you. Okay, I know he's a lawyer. All right, I know that. But just let's.
Hey, I heard everything you said about how people should hate a guy like me. I totally understand. I get it.
But it's impossible.
Yeah, man. So say what you will, man.
All right.
I'm down.
So this is what is frustrating to me because the thing about it is I understand the world in macros. I do. Like macroeconomics, macro studies, macro this, macro that. We're living in one of the most peaceful, productive, healthy, happy, long-lived, economically viable times on the planet. Climate change is an interesting threat, but it's not like we can't figure it out. Like we could probably figure it out technologically. We can kind of figure it out. And on top of that, the kind of optimism that you're bringing to the table is the kind of thing that makes me confident that we can figure it out. That there are people who are out there who are saying like, hey, listen, we got problems, but we can figure it out. And I have confidence in the faith of the structures of the society that we have created that we will ultimately prevail. Awesome. Maybe I spend too much of my time on Twitter, but The thing about it is what's happening with immigration, in particular, Middle East and North Africa and Central America, is there are real challenges. And it seems like the people who are incredibly optimistic stick their heads in the sand about the challenges, and then it seems like the people who are bigoted and just don't want brown or black people around them think that every single time that something bad happens that like it's the apocalypse when it's not. But at the same time, but I'm in the middle between these two people where I'm trying to tell the rose-tinted, happy optimists or whatever that, just opening up the borders is not, gonna save you from the potential negative externalities. And I'm also trying to tell the people who are, hey, Middle Eastern and North African people are gonna fucking kill us all through Sharia law. I'm also trying to tell them like, hey, probably not. By the third generation, most people integrate. There's still a higher risk of, this, that, the other happening. But at the same time, like, on the whole, it's probably going to be okay. I think you stand a higher chance of getting, killed by a fucking coconut than you do a jihadist terrorist, right? In the United States at this point. But all of that being said, that doesn't change real and fucked up things that happen when we have these cultural clashes. I worked as a law enforcement officer. I found, dog fighting rings. I found animal fighting rings. And to the individual, statistics don't matter. When it comes to jihadist terrorism, you can look at the past decade in Europe since, the mass immigration waves, and you can say, hey, what's a few hundred people in the grand scheme of American or liberal power projection across the world? What is a few hundred people in the grand scheme of this thing? Whereas most people see dead kids in a Berlin market run over by a truck filled with cinder blocks. So that's where I'm saying, like, the problem with me is that, to me, it is not the right of random people across the globe to travel wherever the hell they want and keep whatever cultural traditions they want. And it's also not the responsibility of nations who have no legal, ethical, moral duty to these people whatsoever. Say, yeah, fuck it. The economy is going to do good. And overall, this is the arc of history anyways. So what's a few terrorist attacks to 10% increase in GDP over the next 10 years? And by the way, like this is the thing where it gets like really cold for me. I appreciate the stats. I appreciate the macroeconomics. I appreciate the historical trends and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I think that you're not counting into the fact that this does cause cultural whiplash, where what happens during like the mass immigrant trends is a whole bunch of anti-immigrant sentiment, a whole bunch of people get hurt and killed. Whereas if you have a more stable, standardized, understandable, civically focused, smart immigration system that's understandable by everyone, then you can avoid a bunch of murders and terrorist attacks. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. So I think you raised the one good argument against immigration.
Yeah, just I am going to So I'm going to let you. Okay, I was going to raise the question. So I know you probably got a lot to say, Bastiat, and that's cool. You can respond. I'll let you respond. Yeah, I'll be a little lenient. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I think you raised well, let me ask you this. So it sounds like you're saying, I'm not sure if you're saying this is your opinion or if this is the opinion of most people. Is it when you say, okay, most people, I'm not sure. It sounded like you were saying most people don't care about all your data, right? I might even concede your data. Well, most people don't care about that. They care about these individual stories, what we might both agree are exceptions to the rule that generally immigrants follow the law and don't commit crimes and all that. Most people don't care about that, even if counterpoints might acknowledge that you're right on that. Is that what you were saying? Or were you saying, I don't care about that?
It's approximately true, but there's probably some cultural tropes that I care about that you don't.
Okay. Well, just kind of at the big level, I guess what I would say is you brought up whiplash at the end and you brought up violence, and I don't concede the point on violence because in the United States we've had far less of it than they have in Europe, for example, where they got much more restrictive, arbitrary, and I would say especially with respect to with respect to Muslims and North Africans, very ethnically targeted laws that, for example, ban different types of clothing. Here in the United States, we adhere to equal protection. We don't single these people out for discrimination against the state any more than we do anyone else. And as a result, they have integrated historically well here in the United States, while in Europe, a different approach that has been taken in just about every country in Europe has been comparatively worse. Although, to be clear, most countries in Europe have still been relatively successful on this issue. They've had more problems than we have, which is one reason why I try to go with the American approach. But I think that the point you make is very interesting. You mentioned whiplash, right? Political whiplash. And you are right that there is political whiplash, particularly from the right wing, from large amounts of immigration. And that is the one good argument that I really do not have a retort to, that just there will be right-wing reactionary forces that will react to large amounts of immigration. And that is why you shouldn't do it. Even though I agree with everything else you're saying, Bastiat, there are right-wingers who do not care about the data, who do not care, cannot be persuaded. And therefore, if you have all these people in, you will get a reaction that will be bad. And you know what? That's an argument that for now I do not have a counter to. Perhaps there's a way to do it to have numbers of immigrants does not result. Perhaps large numbers of immigrants might not necessarily be what causes that. It might be the chaos that comes with large numbers of immigrants at a border who don't have a process to get in orderly. Perhaps that's what it is. Perhaps it's just the chaos of existing processes. When a lot of people maybe rush a border or something. But that is the one point on immigration that I think I would say is a problem, is the reaction that happens irrespective of the outcomes, just because there are a lot of people in society who just don't like a lot of immigrants coming in very quickly, even if I could pill on all the facts. But I also do want to say one thing, and that is I just don't understand kind of the lack of optimism about American culture, because it seems to me that it sort of suggests that there are other cultures that are stronger, that are more capable, that people are more adherent to, and I just, it seems like the history of the American experience is that that's just not true. It hasn't been true for the last 200 years. And while there are occasionally, I suppose, examples around the edges, maybe people will come here to practice their Amish religion in a particularly insular way, those are basically exceptions. And generally speaking, they've always been pretty peaceable. Not just the Amish, just kind of the insular exceptions. And, most notably, they are the exceptions. So I don't think this is some kind of misplaced fear. I think it's just a recognition that our culture, perhaps unique among all the other cultures of the world, is a culture based not on what you should do, but on what you want to do, what you want as an individual. And that is just uniquely appealing, and that has created a framework for a country that has assimilated more immigrants than any other in history. So.
Okay, so I know that you probably have some things you want to respond with, Connor, and that's cool. But something that I kind of want to raise to both of you, because I think Bastiat heard you said that there was like something you couldn't respond to or whatever. But something that I'm a little worried about, and I thought this might happen, and I'm not sure if it's happening, but just in case it is, I want to raise a question to both of you, and I'm just interested in seeing where this goes. So, Bastiat, I would like you to explain to Connor what specifically he would have to do to get you over to his position, like within your principles, within your morals, etc., etc. And then I would like you to do the same for Bastiat, Connor, and I would like to see where that goes. Now, Connor, you can respond with everything you wanted to respond to if you like, but after then, I would really love it if both of you were able to do that, because I'd be interested to see where that goes.
No, I can.
It's not like a metaphysical roadblock as far as like, yeah.
So generally speaking, is my position that like all of the benefits of immigration, like the economy, for example, stronger economy, stronger country, stronger America, more freedom in this country and in the world generally, right? Weak America, less freedom here and abroad. Strong America, more freedom, right? So I think that's one of the reasons I support immigration, is I think it makes our country much stronger, and it respects freedom a lot more. If you could demonstrate to me that it makes our country weaker, it makes us less free, then I would be, I'd be open to restricting that freedom the same way I'm open to restricting other freedoms. Like, for example, and just to illustrate the logic, I often talk about a really strong military. I acknowledge that the military is a huge imposition on our freedom. Strong military is one of the things the founding fathers are worried about, but I believe it is a necessary imposition on our freedom that preserves a greater amount of freedom by preserving us from the threat of communist China or Putin's Russia or whatever. So if you could demonstrate to me that immigration actually, the kind of immigration I propose would make us less free, And I don't know that's impossible. I mean, I mentioned the reactionaries, that being one thing there, that would, I think, cause me to change my position.
Okay. And then to articulate, and I can respond to that, and I will in a second, but I'll just say what I think would get me to go to Bastiat's position. I'm more. I think there's like a different position besides globalism and nationalism, which somebody talked to me about recently, which was like internationalism. You keep a core of the nation that has like some levels of like principles, cultural identity, linguistic identity, civic institution and tradition, and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's a certain amount of like correlation between some nations that have some level of shared history. I'm not saying that they have to have a shared history. I'm just saying that it helps, right? So if you were talking about like your North American liberal democratic union with easy visas and access and travel and all that kind of stuff, the reason why I would be open to that is because I do think that most nations would retain a core, while there would be an international move of different people to different places, and cultural cross-pollination might ultimately create the something that's greater than the sum of its parts, right? It would retain the individuals while still becoming something bigger than itself. And then that's what I would need to know or feel or believe to move more your way. And then the reason why I'm not coming your way all the way, which I think is going to address the question that you asked of me, does open borders or does open immigration, does it make us more free? A lot of the threats that we have had over the past 2 decades have been the result not because of some great nationalistic attack, but because of micro attacks. So if you're talking about 9/11, jihadist terrorism in general, what's happened is in response to that, similar to an immune system response, the United States military security forces apparatuses and all that kind of stuff have come up with things like the Patriot Act and also the FISA courts and terrorism regulation and all that kind of stuff. And that was the result of allowing a small population of people who did have different values than us, but an even smaller population, subset population, that had completely contradictory and violent aims that ultimately engendered a certain response. And so what I would say is that the thing that I've been articulating all along is that with Middle Eastern and North African immigration in particular, if you just let people do whatever the fuck they want, then that's probably going to create some level of cultural schism. That's going to create some level of increase in terrorist attacks. As a result, there is going to be reactionary violence. There is going to be reactionary politics. So ultimately, what would happen is that if you open that up and you have that cultural clash, then what's going to happen is similar to an immune system response. The immune system is going to assume that it's under attack and it's going to clamp down on everything. So that would be my number one argument. Then my second argument would be related to Chinese intellectual property theft in particular. So they have been reverse engineering a decent chunk of our military technology by stealing tech secrets from our companies and then moving it back to China. Now, this is intentional and strategic and all that kind of stuff. But China, to me, is an example, a historical example where liberalism failed. We thought that opening up the economy was going to open up the culture. And in some ways it has. And I would love to eat my words. Like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, China collapses under the pressure of internationalism. It says, you know what, fuck it. We're not going to be like a weird ethnic superior cultural enclave that's going for world domination. As a matter of fact, we want to, basically be peers with everybody. And we want to full-throatedly engage liberal democracy and human rights and all that kind of shit. Awesome. I would love to be proved wrong. But what I think China has proven, at least within the past decade, is that you can have awesome market economics and nefarious political organs that are like tumors on top of that economic engine. So what happened is instead of the China economic liberalization destroying the cultural pressure of the CCP, because of the rise of surveillance technology, they have basically been able to affirm their control on society through authoritarian means. So instead of getting a weakened CCP that was ultimately thrown off by the Han Chinese inside the country, we now have a strengthened CCP because they can use the economic force of their country while changing absolutely nothing of their authoritarian bullshit, and then using technology in order to reinforce it. So that would be another fear of mine, just to wrap this idea up. That would be another fear of mine, where mass immigration, let's just say that we had shitloads of people from China come over, and within that midst, there was a whole bunch of Americans. I will teach them all to shoot guns and cook barbecue and all that shit. I will do all the American things with these fucking folks coming in, right? But there will be a small percentage of those folks that are going to still be loyal to China, and as a result, they're going to reaffirm the solid grip of the CCP by spying for them and by basically stealing our IP and sending it back. And that's my fears. I do think we have a rival and a competitor, and I do think that we have an immunosystem response when we do too much too fast. I do have another point, but I'm gonna shut up for now for there.
Okay, well, look, I don't doubt, I don't deny at all that we have a competitor. I mean, I think one reason, actually a very compelling reason that we should have more immigration is that our competitor has a population 4 to 5 times our size. Right now, our advantage is to continually run on our technological and economic superiority, but presumably in time, the United States will not be able to maintain predominance or even parity with China if it is going to be a country that is 4 to 5 times the population of the United States. So certainly, prospect of millions more people coming here to the United States, even if some of them turn out bad. To me, seems like a very important thing we should consider from a national security perspective, in anticipation of a decades-long competition with China. So I think that, to me, is a very compelling reason to have more people in this country, because, of course, many immigrants, even if you were worried specifically about Chinese spies, if you want to say specifically, which I think this would be a terrible mistake, but if you want to say specifically, look, communist China is such a great threat that we cannot have all these people from China here in the United States, even if you were shut them out for that reason, which again I think would be a terrible mistake. Most immigrants would come from most of the other countries in the world anyway. So, and of course, I think that most people in China, like most people everywhere in the world, do not like to be told what to do by an oppressive authoritarian government. And that, while you're perhaps right, there would be people and spies who try and take advantage of our system. I mean, that is, I do not think for a moment that it is our immigration system here in the United States with all its strange loopholes and absurdities and long processes. I don't think the Chinese Communist Party is waiting 10 to 15 years to get people placed in the United States. I think they're getting them in through clandestine means anyway. So I do not believe the prospect of legal immigration is what's keeping these folks out. I also, I think it is a little strange, although this seems perhaps to be another point, the idea that liberalism has failed with respect to China. I mean, it's worth noting that China is, the oldest and perhaps, alongside our own, the most glorious culture in the world. I mean, 5,000 years of history, 1.5 billion people, and they've been reforming since, at least they were at one point reforming in a positive direction since 1980 or so. That's a big thing to change overnight, and I wouldn't count China out just yet in terms of a country that has had now 40 years of increasing prosperity, the growth of a new middle class that in time will demand more of a say over its own life. Perhaps Xi Jinping will be the first man to, the first leader in history to perfect a perfect dictatorship of some kind, but I do not think it is such a clear bet to say that is just kind of the fate of the people of China. And in any event, I do not think most of them, if they wanted to leave their own country, would want to leave to replicate what it is they have to any greater degree, have in China under Xi Jinping, that is, to any greater degree than New Yorkers come to Florida and want to suddenly replicate what they left in New York. In fact, I think it would be much more so, given how much more real and true.
I was about to say that's a bad example.
It's not a bad example. They come here, they leave. It's not a bad example. They come here, they leave high taxes. Yeah, maybe they'll say occasionally, "Oh, things in our place were better," but at the end of the day, they're leaving to get away from things, and they're focused on the exceptions to the rule, just like anybody else is when they complain about something or another. And so I think it's worth noting.
I was about to say,
but
New Yorkers in Florida is not a good example for being.
It is a good example. It is a good example. What have they changed exactly? The state has continued to get redder and more Republican. The more people have come here. The state used to be competitive when it was smaller. So this idea that they've changed the values here, if anything, they've doubled down. What they say is clearly very different than how they vote. I think it's actually a pretty solid example. But beyond that, the bigger point, like that's a meme. That's a meme. People are moving here and leaving that state. That state is dying because ultimately people don't like the way it's run. They come here because they like the way it's run. So, whatever they may complain about, because people like to complain more than they like to praise, right? I mean, how many of us sit around just, jerking off saying, oh, America's great for all these reasons, guys. Okay, stream over. Nobody cares about this stuff. It's more.
Well, listen, I mean, you've pretty much given me like a permanent freedom erection this entire stream. So, like, I mean, I appreciate it because, like, honestly, I was feeling very flaccid about American freedom and the prospects of like liberalism in the modern era. But that's probably my fault for who I associate.
We're just pretty depressing place.
Well,
it's just worth thinking, like, what is the more compelling model? What is the more compelling alternative?
Yeah. Actually, I want to address that. I want to address that very specifically because I think you asked me like, how do we handle like reactionary anti-immigrant sentiment when it comes to like freedom of movement or mass immigration in general or whatever.
Yeah.
So the reason why I like to unfortunately this is like a fascist idea, but it's also a fairly common like political idea, which is like political corporatism, conceptualizing the state as like a body and then evaluating its health and then evaluating for its health in certain ways and identifying problems and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, it leads to like pretty quick slaughters of like dissidents and all that kind of stuff. But that aside. The immunoresponse in particular, I think the analogy actually fits fairly perfectly for the way that the human body can misidentify pathogens, attack them, and then how it can be incorporated in the future. Like, so for instance, like our gut bacteria is made up of our guts. Our breakdown of like food and all that kind of stuff is primarily done by bacteria. It's not even done by the digestive system. It's actually like foreign living creatures living inside of us, but they're viewed as like a synthesis of the human body in order to make things work. When it comes to misidentifying pathogens or something like that, it would be as if like you're getting a shock of a new bacteria or a new virus into the immune system, and as a result, your body clamps down. But that doesn't mean that thing can't be incorporated into something positive. And I know I'm going on like a really awful analogy here, but what I'm saying is if you wanted to get the body used to something, then you introduce a small amount of it over a long period of time in order to develop a certain level of amicable response. You don't overwhelm the system instantaneously. And I do think that there's a way to dial that in immigration wise, where you do have people from different regions of the world who are selected whether or not they're positive contributors to society or negative contributors to society. And as a result, you basically make those selections based off of what you think it is. You pick a certain amount of number of people to allow in at a certain time. And as a result, you minimize the inflammation in this analogy. That way the body is able to incorporate it into something positive. And so that's where I'm not like a groiper. Like, I'm not like an immigrant freeze person. And you were asking me earlier, like, oh, well, because of some Pew Research polls, are all Palestinians fucked because like 70% of them support suicide bombing? No, of course not. But the people who do come, let's use like Gaza or the West Bank, where there is like 70% support for suicide bombing or something like that, I would want part of their immigration process to be like, what do you do now? What do you want to do? What are your virtues? What are your values? What are your aspirations? Where do you want to be? What's your history like? Like all that kind of stuff. Coordinate with local law enforcement in order to figure out whether or not that person's lying. Coordinate with that person's social media to see whether or not that person's lying. And if they're not, and you think that they would be a good fit, then fuck yeah, come on. And like I said, inside every young Vietnamese person, there's an American waiting to come out. But if you find that person who's like, nah, fuck you, United States is the devil, suicide bombing is okay, fuck Israelis, fuck Jews, fuck Christians, fuck everybody else. Islam will reign supreme. May, the Ayatollah rain holy fire down on the Jews or whatever, then fuck that person. No, they're not coming into the fucking country. And that's kind of where like the criteria, the reason why I'm so uncomfortable with like mass immigration or whatever is because if you have a border check and this person hasn't committed a crime and you don't take time to like evaluate their social media history or their ideology or who they are or whatever, then that second person gets in. And no offense, but fuck that second person.
What? I just, out of curiosity, like, you seem to concede earlier the point that I made that, like, immigrants have way less likelihood of doing all this stuff compared to native-born Americans, right? I mean, maybe you dispute that.
I
mean,
did.
you
As
talk
a matter
about
of fact, that was something
Do you
that I
dispute
wanted
that?
to bring. No, yeah. Okay, so this is where I don't dispute the stat. But I think the stat is obvious. Like, of course,
Okay,
if you have
so-
1% of the, hold on, I want to explain this
Okay.
because I feel like it needs to be contextualized. If you have 1% of the population that's being added to the population, they're worried about assimilation, they're worried about hate crimes, they're worried about not integrating, then of course 95% of them are going to fly low and try not to get their ass kicked. And when you have a bunch of lackadaisical, no offense Americans, uneducated, douchey, shitty Walmartian assholes who take for granted the freedoms and liberties and everything that we have in this country, and they don't give a shit about anything, yeah, they're going to be bigger fucking assholes than the people who are moving here with like a certain idealistic view of the country. So that's where that context is important.
So, I mean, just to be clear, we're talking about like 20% of the population of this country is born in another country. Like, this is a huge part of the population.
How is that not enough for you?
Wait. First of all, it doesn't fucking matter if it's 80% of the population of the country, because these groups are fucking irrelevant compared to individual rights. And if you cannot demonstrate some kind of serious harm to the individual, the group is such a secondary, abstract construct. Say that, yes, based on the group, we will restrict the freedom of the individual. That is so at odds with everything that I think is core to the American project. Say this arbitrary defined group. We're going to discriminate against them because they happen to be born on the wrong side of the imaginary line that restricts what government can cross here and what kind of laws operate on here or another. It's just it's sort of frustrating it's sort of frustrating, admittedly, that like we agree, right, that these people are committing less crime, including terrorism, including female genital mutilation, which was always illegal in this country, and all the rest of that. And yet, basically, we agree that the big problem is the snapback, from other people, right? I mean, and if you don't concede that's a problem, if you've got other problems, right, we can talk about those, but we at least agree that that's a problem. And yet, I recognize that's a problem. All right, that right-wing snapback is a potential risk. And that really is the only problem I see any kind of empirical basis to say, yeah, that's a problem. That could happen. And yet, I mean, it seems like, if we want to just argue, hey, we need to have keyhole solutions that don't drive people into voting voting for absurd reasons against realities we both recognize. It doesn't matter, right? I get what you're saying. That if you're saying that, hey, look, all these different people, yeah, they're fine, Bastiat, but at the end of the day, these voters are dumb. These, as you called them, Walmartians, which is a term I'll have to use sometime. These Walmartians you can't persuade them, okay? They hear a story about cutting up somebody's clitoris, and they just go crazy, and they vote against their own interests, which I concede you're right about, Bastiat. I get that. But it sounds like it's not just that, right? It sounds like you're like, look, you're like, look, these people on the other side of the line, their rights are just secondary, right? Mm-hmm. And I just don't concede that at all. The idea that the fact that I was lucky enough to be born here, like, I'll make a pragmatic compromise to max out, whatever it is I'm trying to achieve. But here in this little Twitch space where you can argue as if we don't have to worry about pragmatic compromises, where we have the luxury of talking about rights and good and bad and evil and all that, I just do not understand how you can say, well, the rights of the individual who was born on this side of the line, well, they are so great, in fact, that we acknowledge they're likelier to commit crimes, and yet we will do nothing to control them. We will not go through their social media. It would be very authoritarian. We will not go through and question their parents as to whether they are ready to have children. We're not going to do anything like that, because that would be unjust, authoritarian. These are Americans. They have rights. But these other people on the other side of the fucking line, these other people from the rest of the world, those people need to be controlled. And frankly, if some of them are repressed, if some of those good people are screened out, well, goddamn it doesn't fucking matter, because better that we catch 10 innocent people than let one guilty guy go, when it comes to immigration. Everything's flipped on its head. And if you want to talk about pragmatic stuff, I get it. I get that I got to make a lot of compromises here if I want to have any of this stuff possible in the political world. But if we're just talking you and me, I mean, I just don't understand how you can say that in the abstract, the rights of one are more important than the rights of others.
I just got to say, your passion is so fucking awesome. Connor, respond.
I'll
I love it so much.
Yeah, I'll explain it. So we are jumping between like ideal and pragmatic. So I'll try to give you something to actually sink your teeth into. And there is a point that you said earlier that I absolutely have to address, because I do think it's an interesting part of where our culture is right now. But to address the first part, why do people over this arbitrary line not matter as much, right? So for me, what's interesting is you brought up a whole bunch of things that I can't object with. You're like, oh, because they were born in a different country, they speak a different language, blah, blah, blah. They matter less. No, that's not why they matter less. And that's not even why I care whether or not they can come here. It's purely ideological discrimination. It all has to do with the ideas that are in somebody's head. If somebody has an ideology that I see as parallel to mine, then they're welcome to integrate into my society, because ultimately it's not going to be a problem. But if somebody has an ideology that's contrary to mine, whether if it's a theocracy, support for suicide bombing, support for FGM, support for a bunch of other stuff, then yeah, I absolutely reserve the right to discriminate against those people when they're trying to gain access to the world's greatest empire on the planet, 100%. And this is the other thing that, like, it's really bugging to me, because I'm a fucking millennial, so I get it. Like, I'm old as fucking dirt. I'm like 1,000 years old to all you fucking Zoomer babies. But at the same time, what happened because of basically people having large access to an increasingly globalized society was we had 2 fucking jetliners hijacked, flown into the sides of buildings, billions of dollars of damage, 3,000 people killed in a single day. And then on top of that, if you're not interested in that, you don't care about that, you just say, we can take one of those every decade because it's 3,000 people, a few $1 billion worth of damage compared to the overall economy. Who gives a fuck? If you're willing to take that hit, then you also have to include the reactionary wall Martians baying for blood for 2 decades in the wake of that, and basically launching counteroffensives into other parts of the world in order to kill people who are ideologically aligned with that, and all of the collateral damage that causes, because that's another few $1 billion worth of damage, and I believe a few 100,000 people killed in those conflicts. So no, these things are not small potatoes. They absolutely are consequential. I understand that macroeconomically or macro policy or macro immigration or whatever, we can just say, fuck it, few 100,000 people, who gives a shit? But this matters to the people who are in those countries, and it matters to the people who are here, and it matters to fucking boomers like me, who when I was 13 got to watch fucking thousands of people commit suicide by jumping out of fucking burning buildings. And to bring it back, I know that that's inflammatory. Give me 1 second. One of the things that you said that was like the root of our greatness that I fundamentally disagree with it, because like basically here's my fucking tradcon right-wing fucking take. I don't think that doing what you want is what makes America great. That's what makes America appealing. It's what makes it sexy. It's what makes good TV shows, and it's what gets people to do drugs and buy sports cars and enjoy liquor and all that kind of shit. But I think that has fuck all to do with what makes America great. And I think that basically abandoning what we should do versus what we want is a very real cultural problem in the modern era, because people talk about what you should do, and then a bunch of Americans, because they have fucking daddy complexes, they go, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me that I should brush my teeth or go to bed on time or lift weights or eat good food. Don't tell me that, I shouldn't do cocaine at all hours of the fucking night and bang hookers. Don't tell me what to do, daddy government, or my actual dad. Fuck you. I'm gonna doom scroll on Twitter for 18 hours a day, and then I'm gonna wonder why my mental health is dog shit. And this is the fucking problem, okay? Is that, like, I don't identify as what you want as what makes America great. As a matter of fact, if you ask what makes America great, it's oftentimes people acting within the aspirational idealistic of what you should do. Whether it's acting in some kind of communitarian good, or looking after their neighbor, or creating some kind of cool technology, or I forget the guy who like gave away the polio virus for vaccine for free. It's a whole bunch of people acting in communitarian goods that we at least tell ourselves are the reason why we're great. But then I feel like we fall back on this fucking nihilist consumerist bullshit that I think is fucking evil. And like, I don't know if you're religious or not. I think I like vaguely remember that you're religious. A lot of Americans don't have a religious core. They don't have a principled core. So when you kind of tell them that, like, American society is like, I don't know, fucking vodka commercials and fucking Marvel Avengers, they don't know what the fuck to do with themselves. And that's how they become wall Martians in the first place. So I know that was a lot of info, but I'll yield for now.
No, I get it. I get it. it's surprising, like, to just be so, like, black-pilled about your own country, and yet also, about the prospect. First of all, just to get the 9/11 thing out of the way. 9/11 thing, the passports, or the people getting into the country. I mean, the non-Saudi passports were forged, and the Saudi passports were the result of processes ultimately the United States government shouldn't have trusted with respect to trusting the security of Saudi Arabia. So in some kind of future, the Saudi government let a lot of shoddy passports through. Their security was not good. So presumably, we in evaluating people who come here, we would at least make distinctions as to whether we trust the papers that come from this country or that country or whatever. To be clear, I'm not saying like no controls. I'm saying that once you get through those very basic controls, you don't get to say, well, too many people. All right, it's closed. Doesn't matter how good you are. It's just we got too many people. We're cutting this off at this arbitrary line or something.
I have a question there.
But let me get to, I guess, the bigger point, because my point there was just say that I don't think 9/11 was the result of like a safe and legal immigration. I think it was ultimately the result of people who, those people violated the rules and lied to everybody and passed background checks and all that, and they would have got in, I think, under any system as a result of that. But if you're talking about that, you can't really. All this system is doing is stopping good actors. It's not stopping bad actors. Clearly, 9/11 is a great example of that, in fact. But beyond that, I think the bigger point, and of course you made the whiplash point, right? And again, I concede that the whiplash point is something real, and so in designing policy, we have to account for that, right? But at this point, I guess I'm talking about idealism here, because I'll concede we have to deal with the whiplash Walmartians and all that. When it comes to design policy, you got to figure out how close can I get to it without you get my point on that. But I just have to say, I just don't understand like the weird black pill view of American culture that on the one hand seems to animate a lack of pride, a lack of faith in American culture, and yet simultaneously seems to animate a sense of defensiveness, like we are at risk of losing this worthless and broken culture to these people from abroad. It seems like, if anything, an infusion of very religious, traditional rights, traditional values types of people would be a boon to the kind of dying culture you seem to describe here. Combining the riches of the United States with the traditional cultures of people around the world, most of whom do not engage in strange genital mutilation, honor killings, and all the rest of it, but who ultimately are very culturally conservative, very religiously conservative. We were talking at length about people from North America and not North America, North Africa, and the Middle East earlier, and prior to the events of 2001 and the Walmartian whiplash, Muslims voted reliably for Republicans in every election that people were tracking. So these are very conservative people who voted for the very conservative party before it stopped giving them nearly any respect at all. So I think it is very fair to say that, the kind of bleak outlook you describe seems like it would benefit from an infusion of people who have not been, tainted by American culture in some way, or at least who have not been tainted so thoroughly by American culture.
So Connor, you had a question. Let you ask that question.
Nah, it's no. I have counterpoints.
That is your name.
Yeah,
go for it.
That is my name. Finger guns. All right. So this is the frustration for me with one of the things that you said is got in under any system. Now, security systems don't it's not all kabuki theater. A decent amount of it is, but it's not completely ineffectual. If not, we wouldn't have any kind of security apparatus whatsoever. And on top of that, I'm pretty sure if we talk to like intelligence professionals, counterterrorism professionals, it's not solely them trying to preserve their job that animates their defense of the work that they do every day. It's probably because they actually see bad people doing bad shit, and as a result, they get to take some level of action. Another thing that you said, which I hope is hyperbole, all the system is doing is stopping good actors. It's not stopping bad actors. That's like another, like, if I was, I know you're not like a traditional internet leftist or whatever, but this is the kind of mentality that I would expect to hear from, like, I don't know, like a ACAB, ANCOM, where they're like, the cops don't do anything except for fuck with poor people. They actually don't protect anybody ever. Like that's like a weird hyperbolic statement. So
I think it's more like I'm trying to say the gun laws don't it's like when people say, all the gun laws do is prevent bad people or good people from getting guns. I mean it more like that.
Yeah,
I think that's basically true.
I'm an interesting gun guy though. So from the gun perspective or whatever, no, it's not true. Gun control does work. It does decrease homicide by around like 30 to 40%. If you compare us to like European or Brit bonger cucked nations or whatever, we have about 30% less homicide than they do. We have 30% to 50% more homicide than they do. But at the same time, my argument around there is around a utilitarian calculus about the balance of like freedom and security. It's not a complete ignorance to the variable of guns on violence. So in the same way, I would say that our security apparati, they don't just affect good people. No, I'm pretty sure they catch like a decent amount of fucking evil motherfuckers on the planet, or else we wouldn't do any of this shit anyways. Then the comment about whiplash, like, listen, I know I'm reminded of the late great Norm Macdonald, who has some chud takes. One of the jokes that he said that got him canceled and ultimately unhireable was that he said, "Oh, a jihadist terrorist set off a nuke in downtown Manhattan, killing millions of people. I'm really worried about the Islamophobia." And that's like the whole point of the joke is that like people are so concerned about the fucking whiplash that they're fucking hitting themselves with like a flagellant whip of like white guilt and like fucking anti-colonial fucking sentiment the second a fucking bomb goes off in the western fucking city. So it's really fucking weird that we can't just address the fucking negative externalities that come with fucking terrorism and immigration and the correlation with jihadist terrorism. It's just a fucking thing. So that's a weird thing. And then about the weird black pill about the United States. Yeah, sure. Maybe we could benefit from an infusion of new blood, because basically all I hear is all the fucking negatives about my own country. And I do think that I have some reasons to be negative about my own country. I think that we sold ourselves a romantic vision of like, we were the people who tried to save the Jews in World War II, and we destroyed fascism, and we did this and we did that, and we saved the Kuwaitis, and we did all this kind of shit. And when you actually look back on history, we were doing fucking dirt. We were doing some evil fucking shit in order to make stuff happen. So yeah, liberal democracy is based. Yeah, human rights is based. But if you look at the actions of our government in foreign fucking theaters, it's more about the money than it is about human rights. It's more about trade than it is about anything else as far as a motivating factor. So while I do think that these goals are not necessarily like opposing, I do think that it's interesting to learn that we're promoting like liberty and democracy and freedom of conscience by fucking torturing and assassinating and murdering people. Like it's an interesting paradox.
Yeah, it is an interesting paradox. I mean, look at all the, we fried, at least 1 million Germans, probably, a million, probably more than 1 million Germans, and an equal number of people in Japan in the course of World War II, but at the same time, what else can you do when you have a fascist regime that's trying to destroy you and enslave the world?
But
you have to destroy these factories that have been located in the middle of cities, and there's no other way to do it.
Hold on, buddy.
I guess the point I'm trying to make here.
Hold on, just one person at a time. Okay, I know you want to say something, Connor. I know you want to say something.
Can I interject? Because it's important.
Okay.
You can interject, sure.
Okay, Bastiat, I love your rants, and I love your freedom, and I love your freedom boner. I really do. Vicariously, I am getting like a freedom erection. But at the same time, that might have been true. But if you look at our actions since 1950, whether it's like, covert operations in petroleum or drug-heavy areas, or if you look at even our interaction with Iraq, which is relevant because we just got done with it, we are playing both sides a decent chunk of the time. We are permitting morally abhorrent things by our peers and our allies in order to get stuff done. And so this is where the black pill comes in. It's because I served in the military. I love the United States. I wanted to succeed. But at the same time, I basically have to know that I served as a part of a military that sold weapons of mass destruction to the country that I invaded for weapons of mass destruction. So like that's the kind of like moral, while I agree with you that America is fucking based and liberal democracy is based or whatever, we have to reckon with the fucked up shit that we've done. But this is where, for me, it's kind of like, it almost feels like a fucking naivete where we just assume that other people want what we have. They want to be here. They want to participate. They want everything.
I mean, Connor, we know they want to be here because they're willing to face clubs and armed thugs to get here. I mean, the people who are immigrating here certainly want to be here. And we know that because of what the great risk they're willing to... Like, I don't understand the point you just made. All the other stuff that you said about, the lefty stuff about it. America is, has done all these dark things all over the world. I get that. And ultimately, perhaps I brush that aside too simply by just saying, look, on balance, the world that America has made is far better than any other world you could possibly reasonably imagine having happened if it had been otherwise. All right, maybe that's too cavalier. Maybe that is not respectful enough. Maybe that is too idealistic, whatever. But the point you just made, tying that back to immigration, saying, we don't even know that all these people want to be here. Look, all I'm saying is give them the option. Don't beat them in the head if they should try. Don't club them. Don't stop them if they should want to try. After they show up and they do the review and you go over their Twitter and Facebook and all the rest of it, don't stop them. That's all I'm saying. At the end of the day, it's the whole core of the argument. Don't stop them.
What's
the
upper limit of this though? That's actually like another.
The upper limit is 1 billion Americans. That's it. As many as we can get, because I really do not believe there's any number that you could prove would be a problem. And we know, by the way, that's not going to happen because all the Gallup research has ever been done in terms of polling people around the world as to when they would, if they could, right? If everything was in place, if they could come here, would they? Well, about 150 to 200 million apparently would. But even then, that would not be something they could do overnight. They'd have to get the resources to do it. It would be very difficult to get 200 million chartered flights in a year and all the rest of it. Right? It's a very difficult thing to do. But, we know there's an upper limit to that in terms of likelihood, but frankly, I don't think there is any upper limit. This country started in 1776 as less than 3 million people huddled on the edge of a not yet explored continent, and is today 330 million people spread across North America. That kind of growth, frankly, to imagine 330 million going to 1 billion or more compared to what we started with and what we've done over the last 250 years is frankly conservative by comparison. We have exploded unlike any other country in the world, and we've been just fine for it. We've been better for it.
This is interesting to me, though, for a variety of reasons. And one of them being that, so if we look at the, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, the mixed economy, capitalist, liberal, human rights coalition of countries or whatever, or even if you look at America as a continent, I think America as a continent, we're already at 1 billion. Then if you add in, I think if you look at China, they've been able to squeeze 1.2 billion. They do have a demographic issue, by the way, as far as continued growth. They actually have one of the lowest birth rates on the planet. So I'm actually not too worried about Chinese population. And one of the weird things about this entire conversation that's just kind of in the backdrop for me is you're talking about American growth because of American power. Awesome. Cool, I guess. Talking about 1 billion Americans. All right. I mean, we can probably accommodate it on the continent. But this is all within the backdrop of a 50% decrease of birth rates planet-wide within the past 15 years. And this is all happening within the background of Western developed nations or whatever settling between 1.5 and 3 births per, I forget what the demographic replacement rate, but it's supposed to be 2.15. We're at 1.5 to 3. I think the United States in particular is at 1.85, and the only reason why we have a sustainable population is because of immigration. And then this is all in the backdrop of increasing standards of living where, you as a natural gas attorney, are responsible for providing the energy necessary for the future without destroying the fucking planet. And you're asking me where these black pills are coming from. Some of the black pills are coming from fucking waking up, signing into fucking Twitter, and seeing a bunch of 17-year-old American fucking leftist non-binary kids who are about to fucking kill themselves because they think that the world's gonna end in fucking 12 years. So that's my thing is, I don't know where this fucking white pill is coming from. You think that we can have mass immigration? You think that we can integrate all these people into the country? We can somehow stabilize our social civic institutions within the next century in order to accommodate 1 billion people. We can create transnational unions in order to solidify our economic growth. We can compete with China as a peer, and then somehow we can do all of this within the backdrop of technological revolution that changes energy and material consumption in such a way that we somehow don't destroy the planet, and we can all do this within the next 70 years. Again, what is your fucking dosage for fucking anti-anxiety meds? Because I'm pretty sure I need to match it.
So before Bastiat,
good point. This is really good. All right.
No. You're gonna get to say it. You're gonna get to say everything. Okay. I want you to say that, and then I want to outro because we're reaching about 2 hours.
Okay.
We're at like an hour 45. So I want to outro. It's been so good. I've been loving the fuck out of this. So yeah, Bastiat, you respond to Connor. Then I will let Connor give an outro, and then Bastiat, you can also give an outro.
Okay.
Go.
Okay. Look, I mean, to quote Dave Chappelle from his recent special, The Closer.
Oh
no! You're on Twitch. You're on
Twitter,
Twitch. Be careful.
Yeah. Twitter is not a real place. All right. Twitter is not a real place. And we're talking about Twitter here, all right? A bunch of 17-year-old lefty lunatics screaming about, this, that, and the other. Look, hey, Twitter is a fucking mental health asylum, an open sewer of all the insane, the lunatics, the lumpen proletariat who dream themselves as being the vanguard of some future revolution instead of the grist that would be ground up on day one if there ever were such a revolution. All of these people are, for the most part, they're mostly irrelevant lunatics. And Twitter is useful as a place for growing your platform. It is not useful as a place for getting the pulse of what society thinks in any real way. I think most people on Twitter, including the insane 17-year-olds you mentioned, would probably agree with that if you really press them on the issue. And I'm on Twitter too. I use it as a platform. I would not use it. I don't know why anybody else is on Twitter except for the purpose of growing a platform that they hope to monetize at some point. Otherwise, I do not understand it because it is a depressing place that does not represent the views of the real world. But, let's go past that though. Where is the white pill, right? You mentioned population growth. First of all, it is true that really at some point the whole world will, assuming everybody's living standards continue to improve, the whole world will have a lower population growth that will probably flatline. I think the UN predicts it'll flatline around 2100 at about 10 billion people or so. When Africa's population growth, which right now is the most explosive in the world, as that continent continues to develop and improve, that'll start to slow down, and we'll probably flatline around 10 billion people, and then it perhaps start to go down. So there is a sort of ticking clock in the sense of how long we can take advantage of this kind of, there's a large number of people from other parts of the world. Maybe we'll never even get to that point. Who knows? But 10 billion people. Who knows? But so you are right that population growth will not continue forever based on current estimates. That seems, though, all the more reason why, while there's a lot of people who want to come here, we should take advantage of that while we can, so once we get to this future, we're in a stronger relative position. But beyond that, I think you raise an interesting point. Where does this white pill come from? How do you think we can do this, that, and the other in the midst of social division, existential threat, the competition with this rising power? Because we've already done it, man. That was the story of the 20th century that opened with two cataclysmic world wars against the strongest country in the world at that time, militarily at least, Germany. And then, the second half that was spent in a competition with a rising power in the midst of unprecedented, and I would say still quite unsurpassed social division here in the United States. A lot of what we have now, I think, compared to the Civil Rights era, compared to the Vietnam War protests, compared to the bombings and terrorism of the 1970s, which, while not as deadly as, say, 9/11, was much more frequent and common, routine aircraft hijacking, things like that. The resignation of a president. These were very divisive times. The United States, in the middle of this period, Civil War. Okay, true. The Civil War is worse than that. Somebody in my chat mentioned the Civil War, but so we've done some. The midst of the Civil War, actually, I'm glad they mentioned that because during the Civil War, now of course the South was annihilated, but the northern states, in the midst of this cataclysmic war, nevertheless still managed to grow their economy. They were bigger and stronger, even despite the fact that the southern states had been annihilated. The United States has dealt with cataclysmic challenges, very difficult challenges in the past, and because of its serious, I think, ability to improve upon itself, to learn from lessons, however painful that learning may be, it emerged at the end of the 20th century triumphant over every single one of its rivals, its serious rivals in the 20th century, and it did so stronger than ever in the midst of an information revolution, an energy revolution for the time, and I see no reason to imagine that things have changed so much now that we're even richer and stronger than before that we can't do that again, with respect to climate change, global warming, and I think comparatively smaller problems of our time. So I think it's very reasonable looking at what America did in the 20th century, but in the 19th century, I mean, its whole history, right up to planting the flag on the moon, it's just a history of meeting massive challenges and succeeding in the face of them. So.
All right, so Connor, if you want to respond to anything Bastiat said, you can, but do it. Just bear in mind that after you respond to him, you are outroing. And then Bastiat, if you want to respond to anything Connor says here, you can do that, but just bear in mind that you are also outroing if you do so. So, go on, Connor.
Yeah, so done it before, do it again. It's actually really interesting. A lot of people in the lineup to the debate, they were like, "Oh, well, what are Bastiat and Connor even going to fight about? They're practically the same fucking person politically." I hope we demonstrated that's not fucking true. I think we have some serious ideological contention. And I do try to... I do have like a more fatalistic worldview. I am more negative. But at the same time, I think that there's something valiant in the fight. Do it before we'll do it again, right? That's awesome. And I wish I had your optimism, but I don't. My mentality is more, it doesn't matter, because the principles and virtues and character that has carried us thus far is the fact that we will face these challenges and we will fight to the bitter end, regardless of like win, lose, or draw. So I don't care if America is the preeminent world power. I don't care if liberal democracy dominates the globe. But I know what side I'm going to fight on, which is for liberal democracy and, America to be a preeminent world hegemon. All of our sins included in the calculus that I've made. So the only thing that I would say, or the caution, is pride goes before the fall. Part of the reason why I'm bringing up these like really contentious issues, I really do respect your intellect. I appreciate you coming after these things the way that you did, because they've even challenged my own negativity and pessimism by participating in Twitch.tv and Twitter for so long. It's challenged my negativity of like, oh, I just presumed that the world was going to, we were going to have like 100 million dead people from global warming, and we all might as well kill ourselves now because it's going to be 110 degrees in Florida. So we might as well all just walk into our backyards and commit seppuku right now. Like that's what I assumed. But since you're so hopeful about it, I'm going to hold off on that. And then I'm hopeful and anxious, and I hope for all of my bitches and gripes and complaints and criticisms and all that kind of stuff, I hope you're right. I don't want to be right about my criticisms. I don't want to be right about my fears of terrorism or security issues or immigration or people from different countries with like different languages and cultures. I don't want to be right about global warming. I don't want to be right about any of these things. So as much as I bring these up, it's because I want these ideas to be battled in a coherent and intelligent way that can actually offer some hope to the younger generation, so they don't feel like bitching and complaining and crying and dying. Instead, they feel like getting into the trenches and starting to push for positive things themselves. And then finally, if you liked my comparative negativity, cynicism, swear words, pessimism and all that kind of stuff, my name is Connor. I run a YouTube channel named Counterpoints. I'm a Marine veteran and a law enforcement veteran. I like to think that I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd. Layman is one of my philosophical political boys. So if you like him, then you'll like all the shit that I say. And then this guy, I called him an asshole earlier in the week. Oh, no, I didn't even call him an asshole. I said that that I hated his position. But natural gas is more based than petroleum, and I really did enjoy this conversation. So anybody who's in my community but not in either one of theirs, please follow, and sub theirs, because
I would also like to, as great as that was, Connor. Mm-hmm. On my end, you were not pointing at Bastiat. You were pointing to a voidless black hole. So. That's okay. I forgive you. Bastiat, go on.
Okay. Well, I will only say, that with respect to some of the other issues, look, foreign involvement, it is important to be honest with ourselves about, the full extent of America's involvement in the world, and it has often been negative. It is only my contention at the end of the day that, it is better for America to be engaged than not. Not that America is always good when it is engaged, or that every act that America has been involved with is honorable or decent. It's just to say that, on balance, America is a force for good in the world. So another point I would say is that people, in this particular sphere here, Twitch and Twitter, people on the left, I think, often have a lot of good critiques, and critiques are good. I think they often, though, do not really have much in the way of prescriptive solutions, and I think the end result can oftentimes be a lot of depression, and it doesn't really go anywhere. So I would encourage people to be, to consume that kind of content, within reason, and I suppose keep that point of view in mind. Don't let it depress you. So back to this issue. I think the past, with respect to the United States, really is illustrative of the fact that we have dealt with large-scale immigration in the past and benefited from it massively. Every time we've allowed ourselves to let in people from all over the world. And I think that it is an important thing to remember that. I think it's also important to remember that this country has dealt with great challenges in the past and will continue to deal with great challenges and will nevertheless be able to thrive and prosper. So indeed, it always has. And I think it's worth remembering that, if you're going to take the Doomer argument, to me, a pretty ahistorical argument, especially when you square up the problems that we've got today with the problems we've had in the past. I mean, if we think, for example, that, screaming people with pink hair and purple hair, all that kind of crowd, we compare them to the folks in the past who tried to secede from the Union, or in the 1960s, the virulent, white citizens council types of people out there screaming that race mixing is communism, or the, I mentioned a lot of left-wing terrorism in the 1970s. The United States has dealt with some pretty sticky situations in the past and has come out ahead just about every time. And I think it is fair to say that it is not a good idea to bet against America, and the power of the American system, and the ability of the American people to thrive under many conditions. I mean, climate change, for example, seems like one such situation that the United States will probably have to deal with respect to immigration, because climate change, while it'll be a challenge for America, it's not going to lead to the deaths of a whole lot of people here compared to, the potential suffering in other parts of the world are likely to be more severely impacted by climate change. We have the resources to deal with a lot of these problems, and they don't. So we may very well have a lot of climate refugees, and we may very well see, whether America rises to the challenge of bringing these people in and then is ready to accept the benefit, really, of these people working and thriving and prospering here. So I think it is important to remember that these are issues that are not just going to remain abstract if people are right about the possibility of climate change. But whatever may happen, it's important to remember two things. One, America has really risen to just about every great challenge it has been faced with in its long march from the swamp to the stars. And two, that immigrants have been at the core of that process, and the American project, and that they have been just so, when you look at the immigrants who fought in the Revolutionary War, the immigrants who make our country great today, they have been historically so much more a force for good than a force for evil, a force for bad. So much more a force for helping us achieve greatness than holding us back. That I just don't know how you could bet against immigrants or bet against our country thriving and prospering from having more of them. So thank you so much, Connor, for the chance to talk with you. I really enjoyed it. And Layman, thanks for organizing this. I know it took a while, to get me down for that. So I really do appreciate that too. And folks here, I'll drop those links in the chat because they're really cool people, and I hope you check out what they do.
Thank you. And yeah, I was not disappointed at all, and that my expectations were at least met, perhaps exceeded. There was I minimally had to intervene, and that was, I kind of expected that because you're both. I pick good ones. I pick the finest. Gabagoo. So yeah. Thank you both. And look, nobody's watching me right now, but if you're watching this on my channel, the links to both of them are in the description. You are more than welcome to subscribe to both of them, because I would honestly, I think my politics are perfectly encapsulated by being half this guy and half of this guy. So if you want to see me split in two, okay, these are the people to follow. So thank you all for watching on whether it's Bastiat's stream or whether it's Connor's stream. Thank you. I'm really, really happy I was able to organize this as well as I did. I think the wait was worth it, and you all have a good night. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate y'all.
Take care.
All right, chat. Give me a second. That is a super hot picture. Let me reset my camera real quick. Sorry for the random noises. We'll be answering questions. So whether you're in YouTube chat or Twitch chat, go ahead and start asking your questions at Counterpoints. I'm in a weird spot, so I'm just going to be honest with y'all. I am working my new job, but I'm still in training, so it's kind of a pain in the butt. And we do have a lot of things that we want to do. We want to get a new computer, which we're very close to. Thank you to the people who have already donated to that cause. We obviously want to pay Taze for his efforts. We want to pay, basically another gentleman in my DMs for doing the timestamps because he was very helpful and knocked us out with that. And then obviously I do have bills to pay while I'm transitioning from a back of the house job to a front of the house job that's sales oriented. Unfortunately, I thought some things that were going to work out were going to work out. They didn't. I'm still able to survive, so don't feel any compunction or pity. But if you want to help us with the computer, if you want to help us with editing, if you want to help us with paying the people who are working on the channel, and if you want to help me eat more than ramen, spaghetti, and some bananas over the next month or two, then feel free. Do not feel obligated, but feel free to do some donos, super chats, membership subscriptions, Twitch subs, or whatever the fudge, donos, or blah 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 blah. So let me get into Twitch chat real quick. Let me get into YouTube chat real quick, and then we'll take it from there. Man, that is a hot picture right there for the. Oh my god, y'all clicked on that? Ew, YouTube chat. You clicked on that picture of me? Y'all are fucking nasty. Oh lordy. All right, so if you're not doing so already, do add counterpoints in the chat. I'm catching up right now. I'm gonna go check in on Twitch, and then I'm gonna go check in on YouTube, and then we'll take it from there. So all right, so if y'all can see me in Twitch chat, at everyone, ask questions at counterpoints if you have them. And then since we don't have any in Twitch, we'll go into YouTube. So thank you to the people who already did donos. $39.89. I don't know if those are super chats or what. If you did do a super chat already, do not feel obligated to do anything. Go ahead and post your questions down there because it did not save the super chats. And then I'll check in with these questions right here. Ericoda at Counterpoints. You think your way of thinking is right, but you hope Bastiat is right. Am I correct, Connor? Yeah, so Bastiat is way more white-pilled than I am. So I think that I am way more skeptical about terrorism, way more skeptical about narco cartels, and I think the difficulty with open borders that Bastiat was kind of advocating for is that the security apparatuses are going to have to clean up a lot of the mess. So if we were to open up our borders to Central and South America the way that Bastiat wants, or the globe as we wanted, I think there would be more terrorist attacks. I do think there would be murders. I do think there would be more drug trafficking. I do think there would be more human trafficking, because the truth is he can have like a universal ideal, but the question is, how does that work out in the real world? So that means that the security forces like law enforcement and counter-terrorist groups and counter-trafficking and counter-narco groups are going to have to step it up. And as a result, they're going to see more human misery than they've ever seen in their entire lives. Maybe the system could ultimately stabilize. Maybe terrorism would stabilize over time. Maybe we would be able to live in a better world. Maybe we can face the challenges of declining population and global warming and all that kind of stuff with some optimism. I actually really felt electrified, felt charmed by Bastiat. I've talked about that in the past. But his optimism is infectious. I want to believe what he says, but I think I'm correct based off of experience. So, you know, I hope that Bastiat's correct, but I still have all the concerns that I did at the beginning of the conversation. So, yeah. Vale at Counterpoints. What's up with the Charlie Puth haircut? I like it. Yeah, so I got bored. Basically what happened was I did have my hipster haircut, as is tradition. And then Destiny got a haircut, and he got the haircut that I wanted, and I didn't want it to look like he looked like a dirty hippie, and then I looked like a dirty hippie, and then he cut his hair, and then I cut my hair. I don't want to be viewed as that kind of like weird Destiny simp. So I like the cop drug dealer shaved head look. I actually think that this is called the Dr. Heemed. That's what this style is called. And so I just want to do my own style. We'll grow the hipster haircut back out. But yeah, I like it. I like the style. Gideon Ark says, at counterpoints, sucks that you missed a reverie, but it was understandable why. I was wondering what your opinion was on the topic of should pro-vaxxers have respectful conduct to anti-vaxxers. Yeah, I think you catch more flies with honey. I understand being rude to anti-vaxxers, but if you're not getting more people to actually get vaccinated, then you have to take a multiple approach, right? Some people can be mean, some people can be nice, and some people can be in between, and some people can use information, and some people can use jokes, and some people can use memes. It's a multivariant approach. And by the way, like if somebody doesn't get a vaccine, that's kind of on them at this point. So, obviously they could hurt or kill other people, but it is what it is. So Bullet Sponge says, dig the Max Payne 3 look. Thank you. I do enjoy looking like a neo-Nazi or a cop who's trying to buy drugs from you. Either way, I enjoy the look. Cecilia says, at counterpoints, nice hair. How's the membership with the Proud Boys going? Great performance, by the way. Number one, thank you. I did enjoy the debate with Bastiat. I think he's a good duder. Then how is my membership with the Proud Boys? If they would chill the fuck out, maybe we'd be Proud Boys, but they were kind of douchebags and assholes and beat the fuck out of people and all that kind of stuff. So my membership is expired, So Bullet Sponge, check counterpoints. Love the content, homie. Keep it up. Yeah, thank you, buddy. Ericoda at counterpoints. It seems like almost blinds himself to the amounts of suffering that comes with the solution he wants. I feel like this doesn't soothe reactionary thinking. It doesn't. It doesn't at all. And that was my problem with it. But it was, I brought up that Norm Macdonald joke where it's like, nuke goes off in downtown Manhattan. Will you please think of the Islamophobia? Because it seems like, seriously, like half a dozen to a few dozen people get their heads chopped off or run over by a truck or blown up in a market. And they're just like, oh, well, that's the price we pay. And I feel like it's kind of like normalization bias or just world bias where they don't want to acknowledge that something fucked up just happened that was controllable. But, whatever. Red QWERTY U at counterpoints. Check out Peter Zehan. He is a geostrategist, and his thesis is America is going to withdraw from the global order, and as a result, the world order is going to collapse. But America, we'll see. I hope not. I really hope not. That would be frustrating. CJW74. That is way too gracious. Wow. Okay, that was not necessary. I was thinking like $5, buddy. Holy shit. If you're not a professional, okay, by the way, we're going to be very real here. Okay. If you're a professional making money and you're doing good and this is just sitting in your account, that's fine. I appreciate it. I want to pay Taze. I want to pay the editor. I want to pay everybody. I want to pay myself, like all that kind of stuff. I'm a capitalist at heart. I don't feel guilty about money. But if you're a college student, please do not donate this amount of money. Please donate like $2 or $5. That's what I was talking about. ZJW, you do not need to do that. Sincerely appreciate you, though. Thank you kindly. We will put it to good use. Goddamn, buddy. I'm fucking blown away by that. Thank you. Oh, God. Nicholas McCall, who became a member. Thank you, by the way. At Counterpoints, I supported Vosh when he got started on YouTube. I hope to make you as big a star. Thank you, Nicholas. Appreciated. Hopefully we can, even if we don't get Vosh big, but we get self-sustainable big where I could do this full time, I would be a very happy camper. Just got to keep the wife happy and, she'll let me do this. Red QWERTY U at Counterpoints. Do you feel the sudden urge to go buy a cabin in the woods and plot the overthrow of the government? I do, actually. ZJW74 with a $200 PayPal, or not PayPal, Super Chat, whatever, says, get some groceries, you beta hair boy. All right, I want to be clear with y'all. Bills are paid. I'm going to survive. Dogs are going to survive. Wife's going to survive, and all that kind of stuff. It's just a little crunch. I'm moving into a really good job. I'm very excited about it. It's going to be lucrative. It's just a little bit of a crunch. So please I don't need your pity or your crazy dollary dues. But if you want to pitch in, it would be very appreciated at this time. In ZJW74, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It does mean it's the money. It's appreciated. But it's also what the money says, which is that y'all believe enough in this channel that you're willing to put some of your money behind it, which means a lot to me, because obviously this is what I want to do professionally. So I am getting a little, little tear in the corner of my eye. So I'm going to keep it moving. Calvin Lukes at Counterpoints. Debate me on throwing used car batteries in the oceans. It's a safe and legal thrill! Exclamation point. Yeah, we can talk about that, buddy. ZJW74 at Counterpoints. You were happy now, but wait till you see the counterquotes. Oh shit, it's gonna be bad, isn't it? All right, let me check in on Twitch. Samantha Warpath is the only person who asks questions, despite 6 of you hanging out in here. I would answer all of your questions. You don't need to give me any money. But Samantha Warpath says, at Counterpoints, are you on the skinhead arc? Yeah, maybe aesthetically we're going to be on the skinhead arc. That way we can trick all the right wingers into thinking we're more extreme than we are. You know, like we'll have the aesthetic of extremist right wing, but we'll have the centrist Chad takes that y'all are accustomed to. So yeah, I appreciate you. So Twitch chat, I am embarrassed by your lack of participation. You need to either ask questions, or I'm going to assume that you're just chilling. I'm going to check in on YouTube chat one more time, make sure that they're doing okay, answer their questions, and then I'm coming back to y'all. And if y'all don't have anything, we're going to wrap up the evening. But I do appreciate you being here. Your watch time is contributing to us getting towards affiliate or whatever, where we can actually start monetizing Twitch. So I do appreciate you being here. I know there's a hippy dippy going on, so I do appreciate you being here as well. All right, let's check in on YouTube chat. Vale at you're flopping. Vale says at Counterpoints, you're flopping on Twitter. Why am I flopping on Twitter? I'm still posting dad memes and cat memes. I'm still posting things that are just enough to get me canceled by leftists. What's the problem with my Twitter? So Nicholas McHale at Counterpoints, the fat guy was the most likable character in American History X, though. I actually I heard somebody there was like a punk song, a very racist punk song that he was listening to, and I lived in a podunk town in Central Florida, and there was actually somebody who was playing the same music in his car, unironically driving a red pickup with Confederate flags, and I was like, oh shit! Turns out that those people do exist. Nico P, how do you feel about David Pacman? So I said this. I was kind of surprised. I was kind of surprised by a comment that I got about David Pacman. My impression from the few times that I watched David Pacman is that he's an earnest, non-profane political commentator who's trying to do the best he has with the stuff that he has. That was my impression. Somebody said that David Pacman is a like unconscionable grifter who is like making shit up, and like I haven't seen that. Now bear in mind, I think I've seen like a total of like 2 hours of David Pacman, but I would be very curious to get some negative examples of David Pacman being a bad actor. I think it would be interesting. Eternal Sage says, at Counterpoints, what does perennialism mean to you? How does it inform your perspective? Yeah, that's a great question. So Layman, the guy who was actually hosting the debate, he was the one who introduced me to perennialism, and it's something that I already believed in without necessarily knowing how to articulate it. He said that perennialism to him meant the perpetual truth of spirituality and religion, meaning that Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, all that kind of stuff, these are all the flawed attempts of mystics to chip away at the face of God and to understand spirituality, transcendentalism, the eternal, philosophy, knowledge, truth, and all that kind of stuff. And what's true within all of those religions is what's actually true about God or religion or spirituality. So while no individual religion is specifically correct in all of its dogmatism, they are all chipping away at the same thing, and that there is something there worthy of contemplation and experience and connection and prayer and meditation and all that kind of stuff. So that's where, for me, I've always felt like there was a God, but I didn't believe in any specific dogmatic religion because I used the kind of like atheist 10-head debate bro logic to kind of think my way out of religion. But I knew there was something there. I knew there was something that I needed. I knew that there was a spiritual contemplative bedrock to the world and existence that I wanted to consider. So by adopting the phrase perennial, if perennialism is the appropriate term, like a perennial Christian or a perennial deist or something like that, by adopting that term, I was able to kind of like, instead of always jumping between like all of my shaky thoughts about religion and spirituality, perennial deist is a way to capture the essence of my spiritual thought in 2 words that make me feel comfortable when I express to other people what I believe in. So, yeah. 09Y Do says, at Counterpoints, watch a video of you saying that Arabs are from the Arabian Peninsula and that Phoenicians are from North Africa. Those are fighting words where I come from. That's awesome. If you're in if you're in the Discord, then tell me why those are fighting words in the Discord. I want to know. And then if you're not in the Discord, DM me on Twitter _counterpoints_ and tell me why. Vale at Counterpoints, favorite video game, also console. These are the questions that need answering. I mean, Titanfall 2 is obviously one of the best games ever made. It was one of the few video games that actually gave me feelings in the past decade. Halo is obviously the OG, Combat Evolved in particular. Everything else kind of feels derivative, but Halo in general is a pretty good series, although 4 and 5 kind of pissed me off. And then I'm very hopeful about Infinite. And then I would say Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the original, was just multiplayer brilliance. I literally tweeted about that today, where some of the classes that you could build, if it was like the sprint class with a throwing knife and the tactical knife, that was awesome. The Akimbo 1887s, that was awesome. The sniper rifles were awesome. The Predator drone was obviously like a classic kill streak that just got you addicted to doing well in the multiplayer verse. So Modern Warfare 2 was a classic. And then obviously Noob Tube with the grenade launchers and Scavenger and whatever the one that made your explosives more deadly, that was a classic. So anything that would make another opposing player furious is what I played as in Modern Warfare 2. So Cecilia says, at Counterpoints, I've heard someone say nearly the exact same of you. That's interesting. Cecilia, I wonder if they're saying that I was dry but good faith, or that I was a weirdo grifter who made up my positions in order to be cool. Because my positions are not cool. We have found an eclectic group of people who appreciate some level of like nuanced charitability and good faith, while also wanting people to scream at each other. And that's very cool for me. But I think it would be way easier to go like hard left or hard right and just, just jerk off a mainstream audience, but whatever. Excuse me. Jordan Crawford at Counterpoints. Do you think religion is net positive or negative for society? Net positive. I'll probably make a video about it eventually. Kill Notes at Counterpoints. Are you bad at RTS games? What about trying single player Total War Warhammer games? Yeah, so we're going to update the gaming system, and I'm probably going to play like every Warhammer 40,000 video game that's ever been made, and while streaming, because I want to stream for y'all too. And I do love RTSs, but kind of what happened was like Command and Conquer, Red Alert were just like so formative in my experience. And then obviously like Age of Empires, it kind of feels dirty to go to RTSs because I feel like I peaked in that experience. So I don't want to go back for nostalgia's sake and then ruin my experience by playing it again in a different thing that might not be as good. Because I was so young at the time. I was probably like 7 or 8 when I was playing like Command and Conquer. So I was so young at the time, and it was such a perfect time for me to get into that world. And I didn't notice any of the cheats or the schlock because I was so young. I don't really want to go back and notice cheese or schlock. I don't want to have a cynical attitude when it comes to RTSs. I just want to enjoy them. So yeah, I don't know. I'll do the RTS for stream, but I won't be going up to RTS for my personal enjoyment, to be honest. Vale at Counterpoint, celebrity lookalike. If you're talking about me, I've gotten Robin Thicke, Russell Crowe, and but those were all black people who said that. So it was all. So it was all people who thought all white people looked alike. So don't put that into too much. Oh, and then also like Greg Brady, one of the people from the Brady Bunch. My wife thinks I look like him, especially when I have a shaved face. 09Y Do at Counterpoints, not on Discord or Twitter, but the gist that Phoenicians originated in Lebanon and there's identity movements over there about being labeled Arab. Well, I mean, that's what I'm trying to say, isn't it? I'm trying to say that Phoenicians, if you look at where they're from, the Phoenicians are a proud group. And I also thought the Phoenicians, didn't they found, who are the people that went up against Rome and actually kicked their ass a few times? Corsica, Crete, Craig, dude, my brain is fucking soup. Come on, help me out. Scipio. He fought in these wars. All right. I'm looking it up. I'm not gonna not know who this is. Roman rivals. Roman. I'm sorry for boring y'all, but this is your fault. Roman North African rivals. It was like literally the fucking wars. Carthage, the Carthaginians. I thought the Carthaginians were allegedly descended from Phoenicians, but I don't know. I just work here, bro. So 09Y do at counterpoints. The solution is to play AoE 2, awesome community and still very competitive. Yeah, I love Age of Empires. So Vale at counterpoints. H3, or Keemstar. Choose the right answer. I'm not choosing either one of those pieces of shit. Fucking Keemstar is a fucking asshole, as far as I can tell, based off of his Twitter, and he's still trying to fuck 19-year-olds despite being 40. And then H3 definitely is not the smartest guy I've ever seen in the world. I know he admits that, which is supposed to be charming, but I've also seen him do cringe too. So between the two of them, if it was like, hey, who are you going to hang out with? I'm going to hang out with H3. But, you know, whatever. I think this is mean, so maybe I shouldn't shoot myself in the foot, but H3 is like a lovable dork, and he was just in the right place at the right time. That's my general impression of his content. Sultan Skinny at counterpoints. Carthage. Thank you, Sultan Skinny. I'm sorry that I didn't check chat earlier, but thank you for listing it. Weekend Jail at counterpoints. Do you plan on doing more 40k lore videos, e.g. the Marine Explained Space Marines? Yeah, I do. I just don't have time. I don't even have time for... Dude, I have a Fury video that's ready to upload that I just haven't uploaded because I literally haven't clicked the buttons. I have 4 Angels of Death episodes that are currently under copyright review right now. So I want to post more content for y'all. I want to be more consistent. It's just really tough. And then I'm going to go check in on Twitch chat real quick. eBells12 at counterpoints. How do your views of large subcultures in your meme continental America belief mesh? And your meme continental America belief mesh. Yeah, so I think that the superstructure of America that I was talking about with the right to conscience, freedom of speech, and all that kind of stuff, and then the right to self-defense and a limited government that follows its own rules, I feel like that's the superstructure upon which those subcultures are able to exist and thrive. So I think that the subcultures, while they can reject the superstructure, I think they do so at their own peril. So if I was trying to admit more people into the country, I would want them to buy into the superstructure, and then I wouldn't necessarily care about the substructures of their communities as long as they didn't interfere with the existing subcultures and superstructure that already existed inside the United States. Vatri says you're thinking of Arizonians. That's funny. Modern Warfare 2 was the best. All right, fair enough. All right, Twitch chat, I appreciate you. Then I'm gonna catch up with YouTube chat, just check Twitch one more time, and then we're gonna get the fudge out of here. I am tired. So Eric Coda says, at counterpoint, some guy they sounds like Archaeopteryx, the bird dinosaur? What are we talking about? The Blight Caller, first time catching the stream, just wanted to say I appreciate you and you're a pretty dope dude. Hope the day was well. Yeah, it was awesome. Talking to Bastiat fucking kicked ass. Bud123, so all you can try to challenge my mind with counterpoints. So you all can try to challenge my mind with counterpoints. All right, cool. Winky face, I'll take it. Nicholas Mikhail, everybody is trying to steal your thunder. Now ContraPoints is on too, in addition to Vosh and Dylan. What do you mean they're on? Did Contra go on to a panel show? Are you fucking kidding me? Everybody's trying to steal your thunder. Now ContraPoints is on top in addition to Vosh and Dylan. I don't quite know what you mean, Nicholas. If you want to explain that, I would appreciate it. If not, just DM me. Vale, at counterpoints, I know I'm not asking these deep philosophical questions, but this is my last one. But what do you have against Bad Buddy and Mike from PA? Oh, that's funny. All right, so what do I have against Bad Bunny? Bad Bunny, bear in mind I'm like a mild DGG simp, okay? Not like crazy simp, but if there was like a political community, if I was just a consumer of content, Destiny would be the person that I would consume despite him being like a sexual degenerate, right? So So with Bad Bunny, my impression is that she was like a right-wing reactionary chud. Destiny explained a bunch of progressive shit to her. She was like, "Oh, that's based. I'm gonna be a progressive now." And then she went way too far and became a fucking like leftist communist fucking dickhole who's purity testing and calling Iranian dudes white. Literally called who is it? Called Dr. Hind a white straight dude, which like I guess you could say is technically true, but can you really say that Iranians are white in the American context? It's so fucking weird. So she went so woke that she like became the woke person who is racist. It's fucking weird. And then when it comes from Mike from PA, if you want to find out why I'm frustrated from Mike from PA, you should literally just go into my video history, type in Mike from PA counterpoints. You'll find my very first Twitch live debate with Mike from PA, and holy shit, was it a shit show. He was such a fucking asshole for no reason. So Ericota says he fought Julius Caesar. Dope. Anybody, I love Julius Caesar, but anybody who fought him had balls, right? Ericota says, no, wait, he was a Gaul, never mind. Yeah. We're thinking of Hannibal. That's who we're thinking of. The guy who was the Carthaginian. Ericota at counterpoints. Hell, I'll take credit for Persian culture as a white man. Nice. Yeah, based. Never gonna let those Middle Eastern and North African folk get away with it. Okay, cool. There's nothing in Twitch chat. I think I'm wrapping up, guys. I'm fucking burnt. So yeah. Nicholas, I appreciate you. Yeah, I'm actually hoping that Contra and other big streamers come down from their fucking high horse and start doing live content and start doing panel shows. Obviously, it's great for growth. Obviously, it's a great fucking time. So everybody who's a member, I want to thank you. Patreon.com/counterpoints if you guys want to become patrons and make sure that more of a percentage comes my way. To the people who are already members on YouTube and to the people who are watching on Twitch helping us get our logged hours, I'm very appreciative. I want to thank everybody. So Bullet Sponge, whoever did donos earlier, even though I didn't see them, I very much appreciate you. And then ZJW in particular, I just want to say thank you for helping out. It does mean a lot. Again, we're going to be fine. Everything's fine. We're just in a tough spot and we have a lot of things to do in a very short amount of time. So thank you kindly. Very much appreciate you. Weekend Jail says, don't forget to sleep also. I will. And then Calvin Luke says, enjoy your new gig or good luck with your new gig. Thank you kindly. I appreciate y'all. Catch you in the next one.